Hey guys, tonight we're diving into the absolute deepest, most profoundly unpeopled corners of Greek mythology. Imagine you're floating in an inky, silent void. So vast and empty, it makes the loneliest stretch of the Pacific Ocean look like a crowded beach on a sunny Sunday. There's no light, no sound, just an endless, primordial darkness stretching out further than your mind can possibly grasp. This isn't just space, it's the absence of everything. A quiet before the quiet, a null before the numb. You can almost feel the chill seeping into your bones, not from cold, but from sheer nothingness. It's the kind of emptiness that makes you acutely aware of your own small, breathing presence in the grand scheme of, well, of not much. Yet, if you're hoping for action-packed tales of heroics and monsters right away, well, you probably won't survive this introduction. We're going to start at the very, very beginning, before gods, before mortals, before anything you'd recognize. This is the origin story of everything, or rather, the origin of the idea of everything. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. It's always fascinating to see how far this reaches. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. We begin not with a bang, but with a yawn. Long before the bustling marketplaces of Athens or the sun-drenched beaches of the Aegean, there was simply chaos. Not the kind of chaos you experience when your internet cuts out midstream, or when your cat decides to redecorate with all your carefully arranged books. No, this was chaos with a capital C, the original, fundamental void. Think of it less as a jumbled mess and more as a gaping chasm, an infinite abyss from which all things would eventually emerge. It was a formless, shapeless expanse. A concept so abstract it practically begs for a comfy pillow and a long, thoughtful sigh. This isn't just ancient Greek philosophy trying to be dramatic. The idea of a primordial void or nothingness preceding creation is actually a mainstream historical fact found in countless ancient cosmogonies. From Egyptian myths to Norse sagas, it's almost as if across different cultures, people just naturally assumed that before there was something, there had to be nothing. A quirky tidbit is that some interpretations of chaos don't see it as emptiness at all, but rather as a swirling, undifferentiated mass of elements. A sort of cosmic primordial soup, if you will, before it started simmering into distinct ingredients. So, was it an empty space or a muddled goo? Historians still argue whether chaos was truly a void or a jumbled mass of potentiality. A question that probably kept ancient philosophers up at night, unlike you, who will hopefully be drifting off. You can almost feel the vastness pressing in, an unhurried, timeless state where existence hadn't quite bothered to announce itself yet. There were no celestial bodies, no chirping crickets, not even the faint scent of a brewing chamomile tea, just the profound, silent presence of this original state. It's hard for our modern minds, constantly bombarded with stimuli, to even imagine such a pure lack of anything. We live in a world defined by boundaries, by up and down, left and right, but in chaos, there were no directions, no dimensions, only an infinite, unstructured potential. It was the ultimate blank canvas, before the first stroke of creation, before the first flick of cosmic paint, and it was here, in this profoundly uninteresting non-place, that the very first stirrings of existence would eventually begin to stir, ever so slowly, like a giant, cosmic eyelid fluttering open after an eternal nap. This was the quiet before the epic stories, the calm before the storm of gods and monsters and heroes. You're lying there, perhaps in your own bed, and the silence around you, even if broken by a distant car or the gentle whir of a fan, is a bustling metropolis compared to the profound, deep quiet of primordial chaos. It was the original nothing to see here, mo folks, except eventually there would be quite a lot to see from the profound, sleepy quiet of chaos. Something stirred, not with a shout, but with an almost imperceptible shift, a slow, geological sigh. Imagine a vast, formless expanse, so utterly devoid of features that it's the ultimate blank slate. Then, out of that immeasurable nothingness, or perhaps within it, a presence began to coalesce. This wasn't an explosion or a sudden flash. It was more like the slowest, most ancient blooming you could possibly imagine. And from this emergence came Gaia, the very first tangible entity, the earth itself. You can almost feel the solidity forming, the slow, deliberate shaping of mass from the ether. Gaia wasn't just a patch of dirt, she was the foundational concept of Earth, the ground beneath your feet, the mountains that scrape the sky, the valleys that cradle rivers. She was the primordial mother, not born of parents in the way we understand it, but arising spontaneously from the void. It's a bit like imagining a painting that paints itself, or a sculpture that carves its own form out of pure potential, this autogenesis. The idea of a deity simply appearing from nothingness is a common feature in many ancient creation myths, a mainstream historical fact that underscores how early civilizations grappled with the ultimate origin. It makes you wonder if they ever just threw their hands up and said, "It just was." A quirky tidbit here. Some accounts describe Gaia emerging not just as a physical entity, but also as a powerful, conscious being from the very start. She wasn't just dirt, she was the will of the earth, the very spirit of the planet. So, while you might picture a vast, empty expanse, also envision a burgeoning consciousness, a cosmic intelligence slowly unfurling itself. This isn't just about rocks and soil, it's about the very first sense of stability, of grounding. In a universe that had previously been all formless drift, historians still argue whether Gaia's emergence was a gradual process of solidification or a singular, instantaneous event that brought definition to the formless chaos. Was it a slow simmer or a sudden pop? Regardless, her arrival changed everything. You're now standing on something, however nascent and unformed it may be. The oppressive nothingness begins to recede, replaced by the faint, earthy scent of potential. There's a nascent hum, the quiet vibration of something truly massive settling into existence. Think of it like a giant, cosmic memory foam mattress slowly taking shape. Before Gaia, there was no here. Now, there is a distinct here, a base upon which all future drama will unfold. This makes her pretty important, like the foundational layer of a very, very old house. Without her, there's literally nothing to stand on, no place for the gods to bicker or heroes to roam. This original Earth Mother isn't some dainty flower bringer. Mind you, she's immense, ancient, and possesses a raw, primal power. She is the very substance of existence, durable and enduring. While you might feel the softness of your pillow right now, imagine that pillow being the entire planet, still warm from its initial creation. It's a comforting thought, a bedrock of existence in a universe that's just beginning to figure itself out, and even though she's just emerged. Gaia isn't alone for long. The very act of her coming into being seems to necessitate other primordial forces arising alongside her, or from her. She needs a sky to meet, a deep abyss to encompass, and a longing to create, to populate this newly formed reality, this spontaneous generation from chaos, followed by the appearance of other fundamental entities, sets the stage for the first cosmic family drama. It's almost like the universe decided it needed a stage before it could put on a show. And Gaia, the silent, enduring foundation, was that stage. She is the ground zero, the alpha of physical existence, a truly weighty presence in the grand, unfolding quiet of early creation, with Gaia, the earth, now firmly established. The universe was no longer an undifferentiated void. You can almost feel the presence of something solid beneath you, a grounding force after the boundless expanse of chaos. But what is a solid earth without a sky above it? It's like having a magnificent stage with no ceiling, just an endless, open expanse. And so, from Gaia herself, without any external force or partner, arose Uranus, the starry sky. Imagine gazing upwards into the inky blackness above, But instead of the pinpricks of light you'd see on a clear night, imagine the entire sky being a living, conscious entity. That's Uranus. He wasn't just the space above, he was the heavens personified. An immense, arching dome studded with countless, glittering stars. This self-generation of a fundamental cosmic entity from another is a recurring theme in early mythologies, a mainstream historical fact that showcases how ancient peoples understood the spontaneous appearance of vital elements of their world. It's like the universe deciding it needed a roof over its head and just fabricating one out of sheer necessity. A quirky tidbit is that in some traditions, Uranus is described not just as the sky, but specifically as the night sky, shimmering with stars, while other deities might represent the daytime sky. This gives him a mysterious, almost somber quality. An eternal watcher over the nascent earth, you can almost sense his vast, silent presence stretching above you. An infinite blanket of cosmic dust and nascent light. Historians still argue whether Uranus was intended to be Gaia's equal in power from the outset, or if his role was primarily to complement her as a symbolic male counterpart, setting the stage for subsequent generations. Was he a true co-creator or merely a celestial backdrop? As soon as he appeared, Uranus, the sky, stretched himself over Gaia, the earth. You can visualize this immense, cosmic embrace, the two primordial forces fitting together like giant, elemental puzzle pieces. This union wasn't merely symbolic, it was a physical, almost oppressive intimacy. Uranus lay upon Gaia, enveloping her completely, never letting light or space come between them. It sounds romantic, perhaps, but it quickly became stifling. Think of it like a very, very enthusiastic hug that never, ever ends, eventually becoming a crushing weight. This intimate bond between sky and earth is another mainstream historical fact present in countless cultures' creation stories, often symbolizing fertility and the source of all life. From this original, cosmic coupling, the first true divine generation would emerge, but Uranus was, shall we say, a bit overbearing. He absolutely adored his children with Gaia, but in a possessive, controlling way that made your most overprotective relative seem like a free-range parent. As each of their monstrous offspring began to emerge from Gaia's womb, children too terrifying for Uranus's delicate sensibilities. Despite his own immense nature, he did something rather unpleasant. He pushed them back inside, trapping them within Gaia's very being. You might feel a shiver run down your spine, imagining the discomfort, the stifled rage of a mother forced to hold her children captive within her own body. This act of imprisonment, this refusal to let his offspring see the light, sets the stage for the first great rebellion in Greek mythology. It's the ultimate micromanagement, a parental control taken to cosmic, suffocating extremes. This isn't just a bedtime story, it's a cosmic drama, a tale of repression and the inevitable pushback against tyranny, even in the earliest, most shadowy days of existence. The quiet embrace of sky and earth quickly turns into a tense, claustrophobic standoff. From the suffocating embrace of Uranus and Gaia, a new generation began to stir, struggling against their father's oppressive hold. You can imagine the immense pressure building, the deep rumble within the Earth Mother as her monstrous children yearned for release. These were not the delicate deities you might picture on a Grecian urn. These were the Titans, the first truly powerful, immense offspring, representing raw, untamed forces of nature. There were 12 of them initially, 6 brothers and 6 sisters, each a primordial force in their own right. Among them were Oceanus, lord of the encircling world river, Coeus, god of intelligence and the axis of the heavens, Creus, god of constellations, Hyperion, god of light and the sun, Iapetus, god of mortality and craftsmanship, and Mnemosyne, goddess of memory. Then there were Theia, goddess of sight and glittering things, Phoebe, goddess of the moon and prophecy, Tethys, goddess of fresh water, Themis, goddess of divine law and order, and Rhea, goddess of motherhood and fertility, and finally, the youngest and arguably most ambitious, Cronus, god of harvest and time. This concept of a distinct, powerful first generation of deities preceding the well-known Olympian gods is a mainstream historical fact central to Greek cosmology. It neatly explains the divine lineage and the progression of power. A quirky tidbit about these elder gods, despite their immense power, many of them are surprisingly abstract. For instance, Mnemosyne, the goddess of memory, literally is memory. You're not just remembering a fact, you're tapping into a cosmic entity. This makes you wonder if every time you forget where you put your keys, Mnemosyne is just having a bad day. Historians still argue whether the Titans were originally conceived as purely elemental forces, later personified, or if they were always envisioned as distinct, anthropomorphic beings. Albeit on a grander scale than later gods, was their power derived from their nature? Or did their nature define their power as they grew within Gaia, imprisoned by their father Uranus? A deep resentment festered. You can almost feel the collective groan of these massive beings, yearning for freedom, for the ability to stretch their colossal limbs and assert their immense power. Gaia, burdened and in pain from holding them captive, became increasingly desperate. Her cries echoed through the nascent world. A mother's silent plea for liberation. This wasn't just physical discomfort, it was a profound cosmic injustice, an affront to the natural order of things where children should be free to emerge and thrive. Gaia, in her agony, sought a champion among her children. She appealed to them, one by one, for someone to rise up and challenge their tyrannical father. Imagine the tension in that primal dark. The weighty silence as each Titan considered the immense power of Uranus, the sky stretching infinitely above them, his presence an inescapable, suffocating blanket. Most were too fearful, too daunted by their father's might. But then, the youngest, the most cunning, stepped forward. Cronus, wielding a sharp, serrated sickle crafted by Gaia herself from flint, silently agreed to the terrifying task. He was, after all, the god of harvest. And what is a harvest but a cutting down, a severing? This moment is pivotal, a sleepy turning point in the cosmic narrative. It's the first hint of rebellion, of a generational shift, foreshadowing the continuous cycle of sons overthrowing fathers that seems to define early Greek mythology. The Titans, powerful and immense, were destined to rule, but first they had to break free, and for that they needed a leader who was both brave enough and ruthless enough to challenge the very sky itself. It was the first act of defiance. The slow creak of the cosmic door beginning to open, releasing not just the imprisoned Titans, but also the seeds of future conflict that would shape the entire mythological world. The stage was set. Gaia, in immense pain, had crafted the weapon, and Cronus, the youngest and most ambitious of the Titans, had agreed to the unthinkable task. You can almost feel the tension in that primordial realm, the air thick with anticipation, as Cronus prepared to confront his tyrannical father. This wasn't going to be a polite family discussion. This was a coup, a brutal act of defiance against the very entity that stretched across the heavens. Uranus, oblivious to the brewing rebellion, continued his suffocating embrace of Gaia. He was comfortable in his dominion, perhaps lulled by the unchanging nature of his existence. He was the all-encompassing sky, believing his power to be absolute. This act of a son overthrowing a ruling father is a deeply ingrained theme in Greek mythology, a mainstream historical fact that recurs with startling regularity. Almost as if it's a cosmic pattern of generational change, it's a bit like a perpetual family drama playing out on an impossibly grand scale. A quirky tidbit is that the sickle Gaia provided to Cronus wasn't just any old farm tool. It was often described as being made of adamantine, a mythological substance of immense hardness, perhaps even the same material later used for Zeus's thunderbolts or Heracles' club. So, this wasn't just a kitchen knife for a quick job, it was a weapon of cosmic significance, forged for a singular, universe-altering purpose. Historians still argue whether the castration of Uranus was meant to symbolize the separation of heaven and earth, allowing space for creation, or if it was primarily a narrative device to explain the cyclical nature of power struggles among deities. Was it literal or purely allegorical, as Uranus once again descended upon Gaia, seeking their accustomed embrace? Cronus lay in wait. You can picture him, a figure of immense strength and resolve, hidden in the shadows of his mother's form, the sharp, curved blade glinting faintly in the primal gloom. There was no grand speech, no declaration of war, just a swift, decisive, and horrifying act. With one sudden movement, Cronus ambushed his father, wielding the adamantine sickle. The act was swift and brutal, a shocking severing of the oppressive bond that had held Gaia and her children captive for so long. The consequences were immediate and profound, as Uranus's essence, his very being, spilled forth. It fell upon Gaia. From these drops of celestial blood, new, often fearsome, entities were born. The monstrous furies, avengers of kinslaying, arose from the earth where his blood touched. The gigantes, enormous and powerful giants, also sprang forth, destined to challenge the Olympians in a later age. Even the Meliae, the ash tree nymphs, came into being from this horrific event. This violent act of creation from spilled divine essence is another mainstream historical fact within these myths, demonstrating a raw, untamed method of genesis. It's a rather messy way to expand the family tree, wouldn't you say? With Uranus incapacitated, his reign was definitively over. He retreated, or rather, was forever separated from Gaia, receding to the outermost reaches of the cosmos. The suffocating pressure on Gaia was released, and her imprisoned children, the other Titans, were finally free to emerge into the nascent world. You can almost hear a collective, cosmic sigh of relief as the sky finally lifted from the earth, creating the space for light, for air, for all the subsequent layers of existence. This was the dawn of a new era, the golden age under the rule of Cronus and the Titans. But the act itself, the brutal overthrow of a father by his son, cast a long, dark shadow. Cronus had seen firsthand the depths of tyranny and the lengths to which a son would go to seize power. This knowledge, this violent precedent, would haunt him, planting the seeds of his own paranoia and, ultimately, his own downfall. He had achieved liberation, but at a terrible price, setting a precedent that would soon come back to haunt him in the quiet, unfolding saga of the universe. With Uranus vanquished and banished to the cosmic periphery, the universe breathed a collective, if still primordial, sigh of relief. The suffocating pressure was gone, and the Titans, immense and powerful, finally stepped into the light of a nascent world. This marked the beginning of what is often referred to as the Golden Age, an era under the dominion of Cronus. You can picture him, now the undisputed ruler, sitting on a cosmic throne, perhaps looking a little pleased with himself for pulling off such a monumental feat. This period, the reign of Cronus, is a mainstream historical fact in Greek mythology, often depicted as an era of relative peace and abundance for the nascent world, though perhaps not for his own offspring. It was a time before the complexities and conflicts introduced by humanity, a simpler, more elemental existence where the Titans, these raw forces of nature, held sway. Think of it as the universe's awkward teenage years, full of potential but still figuring things out. A quirky tidbit is that while it's called the Golden Age, it wasn't golden for everyone, especially not for the beings Cronus had recently liberated from his father's confinement. He had his monstrous siblings, the Cyclopes and the Hecatoncheires, the Hundred-Handers, thrown back into Tartarus, the deepest pit of the underworld. So much for family loyalty. It seems even in ancient cosmic history, some promises are made to be broken. Historians still argue whether the concept of a golden age in Greek mythology was meant to represent a literal historical period of idyllic existence, or if it was an allegorical construct contrasting with the perceived moral decline of later human ages. Was it fact or a nostalgic fable? You are now in a world ruled by these colossal beings. The landscape feels grander, the forces at play more immense. Cronus, having overthrown his father, now established his own order. He married his sister, Rhea, fitting neatly into the pattern of divine siblings coupling up. Their union was meant to solidify their power, to create a new generation that would inherit their vast domains. And everything seemed to be settling into a rhythm, a cosmic dance of primordial entities governing the elements. However, The shadow of his past deed loomed large over Cronus. Remember how he brutally severed his father. Uranus? Well, Uranus, in his dying throes, had uttered a chilling prophecy. Cronus, too, was destined to be overthrown by one of his own children. You can almost feel the cold dread creeping into Cronus's heart. A chilling echo of his own actions, this fear, this deep-seated paranoia, began to consume him. He had seen the cycle of rebellion firsthand, and he wasn't about to become the next victim. As Rhea began to bear children, Cronus's anxiety escalated. Each new birth, a tiny, squalling god, was not a joy, but a terrifying confirmation of the prophecy. He couldn't risk it, couldn't allow a potential usurper to grow to full power. So, driven by fear and a grim determination to defy fate, Cronus did the unthinkable. As each infant god was born, he would immediately devour them whole. You can picture it. A cosmic gulp. A silent, horrifying act repeated again and again. First Hestia, then Demeter, then Hera, then Hades, and finally Poseidon, each swallowed into the vast, dark belly of their father. It's a pretty effective, if utterly disturbing, form of child-proofing. Wouldn't you say? This horrifying act, the literal consumption of his children, is a deeply unsettling mainstream historical fact within the mythology. It paints Cronus not just as a powerful ruler, but as a tyrannical, fear-driven monster, reflecting the brutal realities of power dynamics even among deities. Rhea, their mother, was naturally distraught. You can feel her anguish, the silent screams of a mother watching her offspring disappear into the maw of their own father. This grim pattern, this cycle of consumption and despair, would continue until one resourceful mother, driven to the brink, decided enough was enough. The Golden Age, for all its supposed tranquility, was rapidly becoming a nightmare for its divine inhabitants. The atmosphere in the cosmic realm had grown heavy, thick with Rhea's silent despair. You can almost hear her heartbroken sobs echoing through the primordial spaces. A mother's agony amplified across the universe. Cronus, consumed by his paranoia, continued his gruesome ritual, swallowing each new divine child born to him, and Rhea, Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, Poseidon, all disappeared into his insatiable maw. Victims of a self-fulfilling prophecy he desperately tried to outrun. This act, Cronus's fear-driven consumption of his children, is a mainstream historical fact, a truly dark chapter that defines his reign. Rhea, the long-suffering mother, had endured enough. Her heart, though divine, was breaking with each lost child. You can imagine her silent fury, the growing resolve in her eyes as she contemplated a way to finally break this horrifying cycle. She couldn't bear to see another of her offspring vanish into the darkness of Cronus's belly. This isn't just a mythical narrative, it's a universal theme of maternal desperation and the lengths a parent will go to protect their young. A quirky tidbit, some accounts suggest that with each child Cronus swallowed, he would also pass on a bit of his own primordial essence, making them immortal and essentially preserving them within him, rather than destroying them completely. So, they were trapped, but not gone. It's a bit like being stuck in a particularly unpleasant, giant, divine stomach museum. Historians still argue whether Rhea's cunning plan was solely an act of maternal love or also an act of defiance against the tyrannical pattern of succession that seemed to plague the earliest divine generations. Was she driven by love or by a desire for a new order? When Rhea became pregnant with her sixth child, she resolved that this one, at least, would escape its grim fate. She sought counsel from her own parents, Gaia and Uranus, the very entities from whom this whole cosmic drama had sprung. You can almost hear the whispered, ancient advice, the conspiratorial planning in the quiet corners of the universe. They devised a plan, a clever deception to outwit the paranoid Titan King. When the time came for the birth, Rhea did not deliver her child in the usual, exposed manner. Instead, She travelled in secret to the island of Crete, a rugged, mountainous land far from Cronus's watchful eye. There, in a secluded cave on Mount Ida, or sometimes Mount Dicta, depending on which ancient tour guide you follow, she gave birth to her youngest son. You can imagine the quiet urgency, the hushed movements, as she cradled her newborn, a tiny spark of defiance against the overwhelming power of Cronus. Now came the crucial part of the deception. Rhea returned to Cronus, but she did not present him with their child. Instead, she offered him a stone, carefully wrapped in swaddling clothes. You can almost hear the soft rustle of the fabric, the feigned resignation in her voice as she presented the bundle. Cronus, blinded by his paranoia and perhaps a touch of cosmic indigestion, swallowed the stone whole, believing it to be his newborn son. He felt the weight, the satisfying gulp, and congratulated himself on once again outsmarting fate. Little did he know, he had just ingested a mere rock. While the true future of the cosmos lay hidden and safe, this act of deception, substituting a stone for a child, is a mainstream historical fact repeated across many Greek mythological texts. Highlighting Rhea's ingenuity and desperation, it was a risky gamble, a silent, desperate prayer for a different future. You can feel the tension slowly ease from Rhea's shoulders, replaced by a cautious hope. Her youngest, the one who would ultimately fulfill the prophecy and change the course of divine history, was now safe, hidden away, nursed by nymphs and protected by the sound of clashing shields. We'll get to that later. The future king of the gods, the mighty Zeus, began his life in secrecy, awaiting his moment to rise. The stage was set for the Titanomachy, the great war that would shake the foundations of the world, all because a mother dared to defy her monstrous husband, hidden away on the rugged, sun-drenched island of Crete, far from the paranoid gaze of his father Cronus. The infant Zeus began his secret existence. You can almost feel the warm Mediterranean breeze on your skin. Hear the gentle rustle of leaves in the ancient olive groves, a stark contrast to the grim, internal landscape of Cronus's reign. This wasn't a typical divine upbringing, it was a childhood shaped by secrecy and the looming shadow of cosmic destiny. Zeus was nurtured and protected by loyal nymphs, often described as Adrasteia and Ida, who fed him goat's milk from Amalthea, a benevolent goat whose horn would later become the cornucopia, a symbol of abundance. A quirky tidbit is that to ensure Cronus wouldn't hear the infant's cries echoing across the cosmos, the Curetes, a group of warrior dancers, would clash their spears against their shields whenever Zeus wailed. Imagine the rhythmic clang and boom, a primitive, divine lullaby designed to drown out the sounds of a future king. This secret upbringing, complete with a clanging chorus, is a mainstream historical fact in Greek mythology, vital for establishing Zeus's survival and eventual rise to power. You can picture the scene, a tiny, powerful god growing up in the quiet seclusion of a cave, unaware of the immense destiny awaiting him. While outside, the Curetes perform their noisy, protective dance. Historians still argue whether the Curetes were originally mortal protectors, nature spirits, or early divine beings themselves, integrated into the myth to explain Zeus's unblemished childhood. Were they literally shield clashers or symbolic guardians? Regardless, their noisy vigil ensured the future king slept soundly as Zeus matured, growing rapidly in strength and wisdom. He remained hidden from his father. He was a god forged in secrecy, his power simmering beneath the surface, waiting for the opportune moment to erupt. His mother, Rhea, who had endured such profound suffering, watched over him from a distance, nurturing the hope that he would be the one to finally liberate her devoured children and end Cronus's tyrannical rule. The time for action finally arrived. Zeus, now a mighty young god, approached Metis, the titaness of wisdom and good counsel. She was the one who would provide the crucial piece of the puzzle, the stratagem needed to trick Cronus and free his siblings. You can imagine their hushed conversations, the careful plotting, as they devised a plan to undo the gruesome acts of the past. Metis, renowned for her cleverness, concocted a special emetic potion. This wasn't just any old stomach upset remedy, it was a divine concoction designed to force Cronus to disgorge what he had swallowed. Armed with this potion, Zeus, perhaps disguised as a cupbearer or simply using his growing divine authority, managed to administer it to Cronus, the old Titan, never one to refuse a drink. Unsuspectingly consumed the potent liquid, you can almost see the cosmic discomfort begin to set in. The rumblings within his vast belly. The potion worked its magic, compelling Cronus to vomit forth the contents of his stomach. And what a sight it must have been, first. Out came the stone that Rhea had substituted for Zeus, now lying there, a testament to the cunning deception, and then, one by one, fully grown and unharmed, emerged Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon. Imagine their surprise, their confusion, perhaps even a touch of cosmic indigestion themselves, as they suddenly found themselves free after decades or centuries, in divine time, of confinement within their father's gut. This extraordinary rebirth of his siblings, perfectly intact, is a spectacular mainstream historical fact, illustrating the unique nature of divine physiology in mythology. The liberation of his siblings was not just a family reunion, it was the gathering of forces for the inevitable conflict. These powerful gods, now free, instantly recognized Zeus as their liberator and leader. Their shared experience of confinement under Cronus forged an immediate bond, a powerful alliance against their oppressive father. The stage was now truly set, not for a peaceful transition of power, but for the most epic, earth-shattering conflict the cosmos had ever witnessed. The Titanomachy, the great war between the younger Olympian gods and the elder Titans, was about to begin. You can almost hear the faint rumblings of thunder in the distance, a prelude to the coming storm. With his siblings now dramatically liberated from the confines of Cronus's stomach, Zeus stood at the precipice of an unimaginable conflict. You can almost feel the shift in cosmic energy. The palpable tension building as the newly freed Olympians gathered their strength. This wasn't just a family squabble, it was a full-scale generational war, a clash between the ancient, primal power of the Titans and the burgeoning, more refined might of the younger gods. The Titanomachy, the War of the Titans, was about to engulf the entire nascent universe. This epic 10-year conflict. The Titanomachy is a central, undeniable mainstream historical fact in Greek mythology, the foundational war that established the Olympian order. It's like the ultimate winner-takes-all cosmic brawl, where the fate of all creation hung in the balance. Think of the biggest, loudest argument you've ever witnessed. Then multiply it by infinity and add thunderbolts. A quirky tidbit is that while it's called the Titanomachy, not all Titans sided with Cronus. Oceanus, for instance, the immense god of the encircling world river, remained neutral, perhaps preferring to simply flow along rather than pick a side in such a messy family dispute. It makes you wonder if he just filled out his conflict resolution form and opted out. Historians still argue whether the Titanomachy represents a symbolic victory of order over chaos, or simply a cyclical pattern of succession inherent in early Greek thought, where one ruling generation inevitably gives way to the next. Was it progress or just more of the same, but with different faces? On one side stood Cronus and the majority of the elder Titans, those who remained loyal to him or were too entrenched in the old order to change allegiance. Their power was immense, raw, and rooted in the very fabric of primordial existence. They controlled vast elements and represented the fundamental, untamed forces of the cosmos. Their base of operations was Mount Othryss, a formidable peak from which they commanded their forces. You can imagine the heavy, ancient energy emanating from their side, the gravitas of beings who had existed since the dawn of time. On the other side stood Zeus, his newly liberated siblings, Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon, and a growing number of crucial allies. Their stronghold was the majestic Mount Olympus, a peak that would forever bear their name and symbolize their future dominion. This was a war of contrasting strategies and powers. The Titans represented brute force and ancient dominion, while the Olympians, led by Zeus, symbolized a more dynamic, strategic approach. Zeus knew that to defeat the powerful Titans, he would need more than just his siblings. He needed allies of immense, unconventional power, and so he journeyed to Tartarus, the deep, dark abyss where Cronus himself had imprisoned Gaia's other monstrous children, the Cyclopes and the Hecatoncheires, the Hundred-Handers. These were beings of incredible, almost terrifying might, whom Cronus had feared so much he'd locked them away. Releasing these forgotten, formidable beings was a masterstroke of strategy. The Cyclopes, one-eyed giants, were master craftsmen, and in gratitude for their freedom, they forged Zeus his iconic weapon, the lightning bolt. Imagine the crackling energy, the searing heat. As these immense bolts of pure power were first brought into existence, they also fashioned Hades a helmet of invisibility, the cap of darkness, and Poseidon his mighty trident, capable of shaking the earth and summoning storms. These weren't just gifts, they were game changers, tipping the scales in favor of the Olympians, the Hecatoncheires, Cottus, Briareus, and Gyges, with their 100 hands and 50 heads each, were even more terrifying in battle. Their sheer physical power, their ability to hurl mountains and hundreds of boulders simultaneously, made them invaluable allies. You can almost hear the roar of battle, the ground shaking as these colossal beings entered the fray, turning the tide of the war. The battle lines were drawn, the ancient Titans against the rising Olympians and their monstrous, grateful allies. The quiet hum of primordial existence was about to be shattered by the thunderous clamour of a war that would reshape the very cosmos. The battle lines were drawn. On one side, the ancient, formidable Titans, led by Cronus from Mount Othrys, embodied the raw, untamed power of the early cosmos. On the other, the young, dynamic Olympians, spearheaded by Zeus from Mount Olympus, wielding newly forged weapons and bolstered by monstrous, powerful allies. You can almost feel the tremor in the nascent earth, the crackle of anticipation in the very fabric of the universe as the Titanomachy erupted into full, terrifying fury. This war, a decade-long cosmic struggle, is a foundational mainstream historical fact in Greek mythology, defining the very structure of the divine world. It wasn't a skirmish, it was a total, unyielding war fought across the vastness of the cosmos, from the highest peaks to the deepest abysses. Imagine the loudest, most intense thunder and lightning storm you've ever experienced. Then amplify it beyond comprehension and add giant, mythological beings throwing mountains at each other. A quirky tidbit, the war lasted for 10 long years. That's longer than many human conflicts, suggesting that divine battles operate on a truly epic timescale. Can you imagine the sheer exhaustion, even for immortal beings? After a decade of non-stop fighting, it makes you wonder if they had celestial coffee breaks. Historians still argue whether the 10-year duration of the Titanomachy was meant to convey its immense scale and difficulty, or if it held some deeper, perhaps astronomical, symbolic significance in ancient Greek thought. Was it a literal timeline or a metaphor for prolonged struggle? You are now in the midst of this cataclysmic conflict. Zeus, armed with his newly acquired lightning bolts, became the Olympians' most fearsome weapon. Imagine arcs of pure, sizzling energy tearing through the sky, striking the very earth with concussive force. Each thunderbolt was a miniature apocalypse, capable of shattering mountains and incinerating opponents. His siblings, too, unleashed their burgeoning powers. Poseidon wielded his trident, stirring the seas into furious maelstroms and shaking the very foundations of the earth with devastating earthquakes. Hades, though preferring to stay in the shadows, deployed his helm of invisibility, striking fear and confusion into the ranks of the Titans. The Cyclopes, grateful for their freedom, continuously forged more lightning bolts for Zeus, ensuring an endless supply of divine artillery. You can almost hear the rhythmic clang of their hammers in their fiery forges, producing weapon after weapon for their liberator. But the true game-changers were the Hecatoncheires, the Hundred-Handers. Imagine 3 colossal beings, each with 50 heads and 100 powerful arms. Hurling immense boulders with terrifying speed and precision, they didn't just throw rocks, they threw entire mountains, creating geological chaos on a scale previously unimaginable. Their sheer, unadulterated power was overwhelming, turning the tide of battle in favor of the Olympians. The Titans, despite their primordial might, found themselves increasingly outmatched by the Olympians' strategic cunning, specialized weapons, and sheer ferocity. Cronus, though still powerful, couldn't contend with the combined might of his children and their monstrous allies, the continuous barrage of lightning bolts, the earth-shattering quakes, and the ceaseless volley of mountains proved too much. You can almost hear the frustrated roars of the Titans, their ancient power waning under the relentless assault. The culmination of the war saw Zeus and his allies launching a final, decisive assault. The heavens and earth convulsed, the very elements screaming as the battle reached its terrifying crescendo. Mountains crumbled, seas boiled, and the sky itself seemed to crack under the strain of such immense power being unleashed. It was a chaotic, beautiful, and utterly devastating display of divine might. A literal world-shattering event. The defeat of the Titans, though hard won, was inevitable. Their reign, the Golden Age, was finally coming to a violent, definitive end, clearing the way for a new order to rise from the cosmic dust. After a decade of cataclysmic warfare, the thunderous clamor of the Titanomachy finally began to subside. You can almost feel the cosmic dust settling, the immense vibrations in the earth slowly fading, as the younger Olympians achieved their hard-won victory. The air, once thick with the clash of divine power, now carried the heavy scent of spent energy and the undeniable scent of change. This was the moment the old order crumbled, and the new reign truly began. The decisive victory of Zeus and his Olympian siblings over Cronus and the Titans is a pivotal, mainstream historical fact, marking the end of the primordial age and the beginning of the reign of the familiar Greek gods. It was a cosmic changing of the guard, a successful revolution that reshaped the very fabric of existence. Think of it as the ultimate regime change, but with more lightning bolts and fewer political speeches. A quirky tidbit is that some versions of the myth suggest that even after 10 years of fighting, the Titans were not entirely destroyed, but rather overwhelmed and subdued by the sheer, relentless power of the Olympians and their monstrous allies. It wasn't about annihilation, but about establishing dominance. So, they weren't necessarily vanquished into oblivion, just put in their place. Historians still argue whether Zeus's victory was seen as a triumph of justice over tyranny, or if it merely represented the cyclical nature of power where one dominant force inevitably replaces another, setting a precedent for future challenges. Was it a moral victory or simply a shift in power dynamics, with the Titans defeated? The immense task of securing their victory fell to Zeus. He, along with his siblings and allies, rounded up the vanquished elder gods. There was no mercy granted, no gentle retirement plan offered. The punishment for their tyranny and their defeat was absolute and eternal. You can imagine the heavy chains, forged from divine metals, clanking as the defeated Titans were bound, their colossal forms subdued. Their destination was Tartarus, the deepest, darkest abyss of the underworld. Remember Tartarus from our earlier musings? It's not just a place of punishment, it's a primordial entity itself, a chasm so profound that an anvil dropped from the earth would fall for 9 days and 9 nights to reach its bottom. It's the ultimate cosmic dungeon, a place of eternal gloom and inescapable confinement. You can almost feel the oppressive darkness of it, the sense of utter hopelessness that pervades its depths. Zeus ensured that the defeated Titans were cast into this unfathomable pit, chained forever, their immense power rendered useless in the crushing dark. To ensure their perpetual imprisonment, he placed the monstrous Hecatoncheires, the 100-handers with their 100 arms, as tireless guards at the gates of Tartarus. Imagine the sheer, unblinking vigilance of these colossal beings, standing watch over the defeated Titans, ensuring that none could ever escape. It's the ultimate prison security system, guaranteed to keep even gods locked away. This act of imprisoning the Titans in Tartarus is a crucial mainstream historical fact, not just for ending the war, but for establishing the new Olympian order. It removed the old guard permanently, preventing any further challenges to Zeus's burgeoning authority. It was a clear message: defy the new king, and this would be your eternal fate. The world was now purged of the immediate threat of the elder Titans, allowing the Olympians to begin shaping it in their own image. You can sense the newfound quiet that settled over the cosmos. A momentous silence after the years of thunderous battle. The path was clear for the Olympians to carve out their domains, to establish their hierarchy, and to bring forth the next phase of cosmic evolution. But even in their victory, the memory of the Titanomachy and the imprisoned might of the Titans lingered, a constant reminder of the raw, untamed forces that lay beneath the surface of their new world. And though the Titans were gone, or rather, deeply buried, the very act of their imprisonment would eventually lead to new challenges for the victorious Olympians. Even with the mighty Titans chained deep within Tartarus and the cosmos seemingly quieted, the victory of the Olympians wasn't destined to be a smooth, immediate transition to endless peace. You can almost feel the residual tension in the air, the faint hum of ancient powers still resonating in the newly established order. For Gaia, the Earth Mother, who had suffered greatly under Uranus and then again through Cronus's tyranny, was not entirely pleased with Zeus's ultimate solution. While she had helped Zeus overthrow Cronus, she was dismayed by the imprisonment of all her children, even the monstrous ones like the Cyclopes and Hecatoncheires, whom Zeus had initially liberated and then returned to Tartarus as guards. This deep-seated maternal resentment is a quirky tidbit. Even the primordial Earth has limits to how much her offspring can fight among themselves without her intervention. Historians still argue whether Gaia's subsequent actions were purely out of maternal grief for her imprisoned children, or if they represented a fundamental cosmic principle of balance, pushing back against any single power becoming too absolute. Was it sorrow or systemic correction? From her grief and anger, Gaia brought forth a new challenge to the Olympian reign, the Gigantomachy. The War of the Giants. These were not the earlier, immense Titans, but rather a distinct race of colossal, often monstrous beings born from Gaia herself, specifically from the blood of Uranus that had spilled upon her when Cronus castrated him. You can picture them, immense, powerful, often depicted with serpentine legs, wielding mighty clubs and massive stones, bursting forth from the earth with a fury driven by their mother's wrath. This war, the Gigantomachy, is another significant mainstream historical fact in Greek mythology, often seen as a second, even more violent test of Olympian dominance. You are now facing a new wave of colossal threats. The giants, or gigantes, were formidable, almost impervious to divine weapons unless struck by both a god and a mortal hero simultaneously. This critical detail, the need for mortal intervention, is a crucial plot point that sets this war apart. Imagine the despair as gods unleash their full power, only to find the giants merely wounded, regenerating with terrifying speed. The giants ascended from the earth, some from volcanic regions, others from the frozen north, each bearing unique powers and immense strength. Their aim was clear: to overthrow the Olympians and avenge the Titans. Their attack on Mount Olympus was a cataclysmic assault, mirroring the Titanomachy in its intensity but perhaps surpassing it in sheer, localized destruction. You can almost hear the roar of the giants, the earth trembling under their titanic footsteps as they scaled the heavens. The Olympians, though still powerful from their recent victory over the Titans, found themselves in a desperate struggle. Zeus unleashed his lightning bolts once more. Poseidon brought forth earthquakes and tidal waves, and Athena, Ares, and the other gods fought with all their might. But the giants seemed endless, their strength drawing directly from Gaia, making them incredibly resilient. It was clear that divine power alone might not be enough. This realization led the Olympians to seek out the one mortal hero destined to aid them, Heracles, the son of Zeus. A prophecy foretold that the giants could only be defeated if a mortal fought alongside the gods. This integration of mortal heroes into divine conflicts is a fascinating, quirky tidbit, blurring the lines between the mundane and the celestial, and setting the stage for humanity's increasing importance in the cosmic narrative. You can sense the gods' begrudging reliance on a mere mortal, a hint of vulnerability in their supreme power. The Gigantomachy was another long and arduous struggle, a bloody, chaotic battle that tested the very limits of the Olympian strength and resolve. It underscored the fact that even supreme power has its vulnerabilities, and that the cosmic order was still fluid, constantly challenged by ancient forces and new threats. As the battle raged, the fate of the cosmos once again hung in the balance, awaiting the arrival of the destined mortal hero to turn the tide against Gaia's vengeful offspring. Despite the combined might of the Olympians and the crucial intervention of Heracles, who provided the necessary mortal touch to fell the giants, Gaia was not yet finished. You can almost feel her deep, primordial rage simmering beneath the earth's surface, a mother scorned, unwilling to accept the total dominion of the young gods who had imprisoned so many of her children. This wasn't just a bruised ego, it was the fury of the Earth Mother, a fundamental force of creation now turned to destruction. Her final, most terrifying act of defiance was to bring forth the ultimate monstrous challenge to Zeus's rule, Typhon. This creature was a literal personification of all the untamed, volcanic, and chaotic forces of the earth, a being so immense and terrifying that even the mightiest gods quailed before him. The emergence of Typhon, a singular, overwhelming monster, is a mainstream historical fact, representing the final, most desperate attempt to overthrow the Olympian order. Imagine a monster so vast that his head scraped the stars, his arms stretched from east to west, and serpentine coils formed his lower body, capable of encircling mountains. From his shoulders sprouted 100 dragon heads, each hissing, spitting venom, and bellowing a cacophony of terrifying sounds: the roar of lions, the hiss of serpents, the bellow of bulls, and the shriek of storms. His eyes glowed with fire, and his body was covered in wings, allowing him to blot out the sun. You can almost feel the heat radiating from him, the suffocating presence of pure, unadulterated terror. This was no ordinary giant. Typhon was born not from the blood of Uranus, but from Gaia's coupling with Tartarus itself, making him a being of immense, abyssal power, the very embodiment of the chaotic void from which existence first stirred. A quirky tidbit: some myths say Typhon was also born from Hera alone, in a fit of rage and jealousy at Zeus's independent birth of Athena. If true, it paints a picture of a truly dysfunctional divine family. Historians still argue whether Typhon represents a personification of specific natural disasters, such as volcanoes and hurricanes, or if he is purely an archetypal symbol of primordial chaos challenging established order. Was he a storm, or the concept of disorder? When Typhon rose, the cosmos shuddered. The Olympians, who had just celebrated their victory over the giants, were struck by pure, unadulterated fear, many of them. In a moment of panic that's quite relatable for even supreme beings, fled Olympus and transformed themselves into animals to escape his wrath. You can picture them, the mighty gods of the universe, suddenly shifting into doves, fish, or goats, scattering in terror before this insurmountable force. It's a slightly embarrassing, but very human, reaction for beings usually portrayed as utterly fearless. Zeus, however, as the king of the gods and the one who had finally established order, could not flee. He stood his ground, preparing for the most epic confrontation of his reign. The battle between Zeus and Typhon was cataclysmic, a struggle that shook the very foundations of the universe. Lightning bolts, usually so effective, seemed to barely scratch Typhon's monstrous hide. The earth quaked, the seas boiled, and the very air crackled with their immense power. You can almost hear the roar of Typhon, a sound that could shatter mountains, countered by the furious crack of Zeus's thunder. This was Zeus's ultimate test, the final hurdle before his undisputed reign. Typhon managed to wound Zeus, even severing his sinews, temporarily incapacitating the king of the gods. But with the help of Hermes and Aegipan, Zeus was restored to his strength, and the battle resumed with renewed ferocity. It was a prolonged, brutal struggle that raged across continents, from Syria to Italy, Typhon trying to escape, Zeus relentlessly pursuing him. Finally, in a climactic showdown, Zeus trapped Typhon under Mount Etna in Sicily, using the very mountain to pin him down. It is said that Typhon's struggles are what caused the volcanic eruptions, his fiery breath and attempts to escape still manifesting as seismic activity and molten rock. This eternal imprisonment of Typhon under Mount Etna is a famous mainstream historical fact, a powerful explanation for volcanic activity that persisted in ancient Greek belief. With Typhon finally subdued, the universe was truly safe for the Olympians to establish their dominion. The last great primordial threat was quelled, allowing the age of gods and mortals to truly begin, a period of relative, if often dramatic, peace under Olympian rule, with Typhon, the ultimate monster, finally subdued and trapped beneath Mount Etna. A profound quiet descended upon the cosmos. You can almost feel the collective sigh of relief from the newly established Olympians, a sense of weary triumph after an epoch of cataclysmic wars. The great challenges to their power had been met and overcome, clearing the way for a new era of divine order. Now, with the old guard of Titans imprisoned and the monstrous challengers defeated, the Olympians could finally turn their attention to the fledgling race of mortals and the world they inhabited. This period of establishing dominion and interacting with humanity is a significant mainstream historical fact, marking the transition from cosmic creation stories to tales of divine intervention and influence on the mortal realm. It's where the myths become less about universal forces and more about the quirky, often dramatic, relationships between gods and humans. A quirky tidbit, even after all the epic battles. The Earth itself was still relatively young and wild. It had literally just shaken off primordial monsters. Imagine your garden after a particularly enthusiastic puppy has redecorated it, a bit of chaos still lingering, waiting for some divine landscaping. Historians still argue whether the transition from the primordial deities to the Olympian deities reflects a historical shift in religious practices or merely a narrative evolution mirroring human societal development from a wild, untamed state to a more ordered, hierarchical one. Was it a change in belief or a reflection of societal change? It was in this newly stabilized, though still somewhat raw, world that the fate of humanity began to intertwine more directly with the gods. Among the Titans who had not sided with Cronus, or who had managed to escape his wrath, was Prometheus, whose name means forethinker. He was a clever, compassionate Titan, renowned for his foresight and his skill in craftsmanship, particularly in molding clay. He had sided with Zeus during the Titanomachy, playing a crucial role in the Olympian victory, which brought him some significant favor. You can picture Prometheus, perhaps observing the early, struggling mortals, seeing their helplessness, their vulnerability to the elements. They lived in caves, shivering in the cold, fumbling in the dark, constantly at the mercy of a harsh, untamed world. He felt a profound pity for them, a paternal concern that resonated deeply with his own innovative spirit. Zeus, however, had a different vision for humanity. He was a complex deity, often benevolent but also stern and jealous of his power. He believed mortals should remain subservient, dependent on the gods, without the means to challenge or even truly understand the divine realm. He explicitly forbade the gift of fire to humanity. Why? Perhaps he feared their potential, perhaps he wanted to maintain their lesser status, or perhaps he just didn't want them accidentally burning down the celestial forests. It's hard to say definitively what goes on in the mind of a supreme god. But Prometheus, driven by his compassion and perhaps a touch of his own defiant nature, chose to defy Zeus's decree. He saw fire not just as a tool for warmth or light, but as the spark of civilization itself, the key to human progress and ingenuity. Imagine his secret journey, a silent rebellion against the king of the gods. He stole fire from the gods, some myths say from the forge of Hephaestus, others from the sun chariot of Helios, or even from the very lightning bolts of Zeus himself, a powerful act of cosmic theft. You can almost feel the triumphant glow of that stolen flame, carried by Prometheus to the trembling, shivering mortals. He taught them how to use it, how to cook food, forge tools, craft weapons, and protect themselves from the beasts of the night. This single act transformed humanity, pulling them from a state of barbarism and setting them on the path to civilization. This gift of fire, and the subsequent punishment of Prometheus, is a deeply ingrained mainstream historical fact, a powerful allegory for human progress and divine retribution. Zeus, of course, was furious. His anger was legendary, and this was a direct challenge to his authority, an act of insubordination that could not go unpunished. The consequences for Prometheus would be severe, a brutal example set for any who dared to defy the new Olympian order. But the fire, once given, could not be taken back. Humanity now had its spark, and the course of their destiny, irrevocably linked to the gods, was forever changed. Prometheus's defiance, his compassionate act of bestowing fire upon humanity, resonated like a dissonant chord through the celestial halls of Mount Olympus. You can almost feel the air growing heavy with Zeus's simmering rage, a palpable tension that made even the other gods nervous. This wasn't just about a stolen flame, it was about a direct challenge to his authority, a titan undermining the supreme power of the new king. Such insubordination, especially one that elevated mere mortals, could not go unpunished. The wrath of Zeus, fierce and legendary, is a mainstream historical fact that echoes throughout countless Greek myths. He was not a god to be defied lightly, and his punishments were often as creative as they were cruel. Think of him as the cosmic ultimate authority figure who really doesn't appreciate being told what to do, especially by someone he just finished fighting a war with. A quirky tidbit is that before punishing Prometheus, Zeus also exacted revenge on humanity for accepting the gift. He tricked them by creating the first woman, Pandora, as a beautiful evil designed to bring misfortune. It seems Zeus liked to hit two birds with one thunderbolt. Historians still argue whether Zeus's harsh punishment of Prometheus was primarily a display of divine power to maintain hierarchical order, or if it also served as a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked mortal progress. Was it pure dominance or a warning for his audacious act? Prometheus was condemned to an eternal torment of unimaginable agony. Zeus ordered Hephaestus, the divine smith, to chain Prometheus to a towering, desolate peak in the Caucasus Mountains. Imagine the harsh winds whipping around him, the biting cold, the sheer, crushing loneliness of being isolated on an endless mountain. But that wasn't the full extent of his suffering. And each day, an enormous eagle, a monstrous bird of prey sent by Zeus, would descend upon Prometheus. This eagle, a truly terrifying creature, would tear into his flesh and devour his immortal liver. You can almost hear the sea-chee sound, the raw, primal scream that would undoubtedly escape, even from a god. The horrifying twist, because Prometheus was immortal, his liver would regenerate overnight, only for the agony to be repeated the very next day. This unending cycle of torment, the eagle and the regenerating liver, is a deeply entrenched mainstream historical fact in the myth, a vivid depiction of divine cruelty. You can sense the profound suffering of Prometheus, a constant, agonizing loop of pain and healing. He was a symbol of rebellion, a martyr for humanity's progress, forever paying the price for his compassion. This punishment was not just about inflicting pain, it was a public spectacle, a brutal warning to gods and mortals alike about the consequences of challenging Zeus's will. Despite his torment, Prometheus remained defiant, often portrayed as refusing to reveal a secret prophecy to Zeus, the knowledge that a son of Zeus would one day overthrow him, just as Zeus had overthrown Cronus, and Cronus had overthrown Uranus. This refusal to break, even under unimaginable torture, underscores his unwavering spirit and foresight. Meanwhile, humanity, though now possessing the gift of fire and all the progress it brought, was not entirely off the hook. Zeus still had another trick up his sleeve, a more subtle, yet equally devastating, line of punishment. This would involve the creation of Pandora, the first woman, and a seemingly innocuous jar, often mistakenly called a box. You can almost hear the soft, almost imperceptible whisper of destiny unfolding, leading to the release of all the misfortunes that plague humanity to this day. Prometheus's sacrifice, while providing light and warmth, inadvertently opened the door to a world forever changed by divine spite. The cost of progress, it seemed, was often measured in unforeseen consequences. Zeus's rage at Prometheus's defiance, and at humanity's newfound ability to forge ahead with the gift of fire, simmered with vengeful creativity. You can almost feel the chill in the air, a sense of divine displeasure settling over the world, even as mortal fires flickered warmly in newly established settlements. While Prometheus suffered his eternal torment, Zeus devised a more insidious punishment, one that would plague humanity directly, yet seemingly originate from a place of beauty and curiosity. This punishment involved the creation of Pandora, the first woman. The story of Pandora and the jar, often mislabeled as a box, is a quintessential mainstream historical fact in Greek mythology, a narrative cornerstone for explaining the origins of suffering and hardship in the mortal world. It's the ultimate "be careful what you wish for" cautionary tale, delivered with a divine smirk. A quirky tidbit is that Pandora's creation was a collaborative effort among several Olympian gods, each contributing a gift to make her irresistible and, ultimately, a vessel of misfortune. Athena taught her crafts. Aphrodite bestowed beauty and charm. Hermes gave her cunning and persuasive speech, and the Graces adorned her with jewels. So, she was essentially a divinely engineered package of allure and deception, a cosmic Trojan horse, if you will. Historians still argue whether Pandora's myth was primarily misogynistic in its origins, blaming women for the world's ills, or if it was a broader commentary on the inherent dangers of curiosity and the consequences of disobedience. Irrespective of gender, was it a sexist fable or a general warning? You can imagine the scene, the gods meticulously crafting Pandora, infusing her with every alluring quality imaginable. She was breathtakingly beautiful, irresistibly charming, and imbued with an innate, insatiable curiosity. Zeus, with a sly gleam in his eye, presented her to Epimetheus, Prometheus's brother, whose name, rather fittingly, means after-thinker. Prometheus had specifically warned Epimetheus never to accept gifts from Zeus, especially those bearing the mark of divine creation. But Epimetheus, true to his nature, was less cautious than his brother. Perhaps he was simply captivated by Pandora's beauty, or perhaps he truly believed Zeus had turned over a new leaf. You can almost hear the gentle murmur of celestial whispers encouraging him to accept the gift, the subtle pressure applied by the gods. He welcomed Pandora, completely ignoring his brother's sage advice. It's a classic case of ignoring the obvious warning signs, much like when you know you shouldn't eat that last slice of pizza, but do it anyway. Along with Pandora, Zeus presented a beautifully crafted jar, or pythos in Greek, a large storage jar, which he strictly forbade her from opening. He told her it contained gifts for humanity, or things of great value, knowing full well that such a prohibition would only inflame her divinely infused curiosity. You can almost see the glint in Pandora's eye, the subtle itch to just take a peek, to lift the lid just a tiny bit. Her curiosity, a gift from the gods themselves, proved irresistible, despite the warnings, despite the sense that something was deeply amiss. Pandora couldn't help herself. You can picture her, alone in her dwelling, her fingers trembling as she slowly, cautiously, lifted the lid of the jar, and with that single, fateful act, all the evils and misfortunes that afflict humanity flew out into the world. Out poured disease, old age, toil, war, famine, pestilence, envy, hatred, greed, and countless other miseries. Imagine them, like dark, swirling wisps, escaping into the air, settling upon the earth, forever altering the human condition. This release of suffering into the world is the dramatic climax of this mainstream historical fact, explaining why life is so often fraught with hardship It's a rather depressing explanation for why you sometimes stub your toe, horrified by what she had unleashed. Pandora quickly slammed the lid shut, but it was too late. All the evils had escaped, leaving only one thing remaining at the very bottom of the jar: hope. This final, solitary occupant is a powerful, quirky tidbit, often interpreted as humanity's enduring comfort amidst the myriad of sorrows. Historians still argue whether hope remaining in the jar was a final, benevolent gift from Zeus, or a crueler twist, ensuring that humanity would suffer but always have just enough hope to continue enduring their pain. Was it mercy or just another form of torture? And so, thanks to Zeus's cunning punishment and Pandora's insatiable curiosity, the human world, though illuminated by Prometheus's fire, was now shadowed by the countless misfortunes that plague existence. The consequences of defying Zeus, it seemed, extended far beyond the torment of a single titan, forever shaping the difficult, yet hopeful, journey of mankind. Even after the release of evils from Pandora's jar, humanity's troubles were far from over, and Zeus's displeasure with his creations continued to simmer. You can almost feel the air growing heavy with divine judgment, a cosmic unease that presaged further upheaval. Despite Prometheus's gift of fire, humanity, in Zeus's eyes, had become increasingly impious and wicked. They were neglecting their duties to the gods, engaging in violence, and generally not living up to the divine standard of what mortals should be. This growing corruption of humanity and Zeus's decision to cleanse the earth is a recurring mainstream historical fact in various mythologies. Often taking the form of a great flood, it's a universal narrative, illustrating a divine reset button being pressed when a civilization goes too far astray. Think of it as the ultimate spring cleaning, but on a planetary scale. A quirky tidbit is that humanity itself wasn't directly created by Zeus, but rather by Prometheus from clay, or sprung from the earth directly after the age of the Titans. This subtle distinction perhaps made Zeus less emotionally invested in their survival, viewing them more as a flawed experiment than his direct progeny. It's like when you try a new recipe, and it just doesn't turn out right, so you decide to start fresh. Historians still argue whether the Greek flood myth was an independent creation, a local memory of significant historical floods, or a cultural diffusion from older Near Eastern flood narratives. Was it original thought or ancient cross-cultural storytelling? Zeus, observing the moral decay of humanity, decided that a catastrophic cleansing was necessary. The world needed a fresh start, a purification to wash away the wickedness that had spread across the land. He chose to send a massive flood, a deluge unlike anything the world had ever seen, designed to wipe out all of humanity and their corrupt ways. You can almost hear the distant rumbling of the impending storm, the slow build-up of cosmic forces preparing to unleash their watery wrath. However, not all mortals were deemed utterly corrupt. Among them was Deucalion, the son of Prometheus, and his wife, Pyrrha, the daughter of Epimetheus and Pandora. Despite their lineage connecting them to both the defiance and the misfortune brought by the gods, they were known for their piety, their righteousness, and their unwavering devotion to the divine. You can picture them, two solitary figures maintaining their virtue in a world increasingly given to depravity. Prometheus, despite his eternal torment on the Caucasus, still possessed his foresight from his chained perch. He foresaw the coming catastrophe, driven by paternal concern for his son. He managed to warn Deucalion of Zeus's impending flood. He instructed his son to build an ark, a sturdy wooden chest, and to provision it with enough supplies for himself and Pyrrha. This act of forewarning, a quiet act of defiance against Zeus's absolute plan, is a testament to Prometheus's enduring care for humanity. You can imagine Deucalion and Pyrrha diligently constructing their vessel, perhaps amidst the mocking laughter of their neighbours who dismissed their warnings. The sky darkens, the winds pick up, and then the rains begin, not just ordinary rain, but a relentless, torrential downpour that lasted for 9 days and 9 nights. The rivers overflowed, the seas swelled, and the land was slowly, Inexorably submerged, the world turned into a vast, churning ocean, erasing all traces of human civilization. This immense and world-covering flood is a vivid mainstream historical fact, an apocalyptic event that serves as a fresh start, floating alone on the vast, desolate waters. Deucalion and Pyrrha were the sole survivors. They drifted for days, until finally, their ark came to rest on the peak of Mount Parnassus, one of the few places that remained above the floodwaters. You can almost feel the relief wash over them as they stepped onto solid ground. Two solitary figures left to restart the human race. Upon descending from the mountain, they prayed to Themis, the Titaness of divine law, for guidance on how to repopulate the earth. She gave them a cryptic instruction to throw the bones of their great mother over their shoulders. After some deliberation, realizing their great mother was Gaia, the earth, and her bones were stones, they began to throw rocks behind them. From the stones thrown by Deucalion, men sprang forth. From the stones thrown by Pyrrha, women came into being. This recreation of humanity from stones is a quirky tidbit, emphasizing the Earth's role in human origins and possibly explaining humanity's endurance. Thus, a new, more resilient race of mortals emerged, born from the very Earth itself, signaling a fresh start after the deluge. With humanity repopulated by Deucalion and Pyrrha, the world finally began to settle into a new, albeit still dramatic, equilibrium. You can almost feel the fresh, clean air after the Great Flood, a sense of cosmic organization taking hold as the various divine powers found their rightful places. The era of primordial chaos and titanomachy was definitively over, replaced by the structured, albeit often tumultuous, reign of the Olympian hierarchy. The establishment of the 12 Olympians as the dominant pantheon is a core, undeniable mainstream historical fact in Greek mythology. This wasn't just a matter of seniority, it was a division of power, a celestial bureaucracy put in place to govern the cosmos. Think of it as the ultimate divine board meeting, where everyone got their specific portfolio. A quirky tidbit is that the number 12 itself holds ancient significance, appearing in many cultures' cosmic structures, from zodiac signs to months of the year. It gives a sense of completeness and balance to the divine assembly. Historians still argue whether the concept of the 12 Olympians was a fixed and rigid pantheon from the earliest times, or if its composition evolved over centuries, with some deities gaining or losing prominence based on shifting cultural and religious practices. Was it always 12? Or did the roster change over time? At the very top, of course, sat Zeus, the undisputed king of the gods, lord of the sky, wielder of the thunderbolt. He presided over the council, often mediating disputes between his famously squabbling siblings and offspring. You can imagine him, a figure of immense power and authority, seated on his grand throne atop Mount Olympus, occasionally letting out a booming laugh or a thunderous scowl. Beside him, often with a disapproving glare, sat his queen and sister, Hera, goddess of marriage and childbirth, and notoriously jealous of Zeus's numerous infidelities. Then there was Poseidon, god of the sea, earthquakes, and horses, ruling his watery domain with his mighty trident. His realm was vast and often turbulent, reflecting his own temperamental nature. Hades, though a full Olympian and brother to Zeus and Poseidon, rarely resided on Mount Olympus. He preferred his gloomy, shadowy kingdom of the underworld, ruling over the dead and the riches beneath the earth. He was a solemn, unyielding god, often feared but rarely malicious without cause. You can almost feel the chill emanating from his dark realm, a place of finality and hidden treasures. Demeter, goddess of agriculture and harvest, watched over the bounty of the earth, her moods directly influencing the fertility of the land. Her happiness brought abundance, her sorrow, barrenness, and Hestia, the eldest of the siblings swallowed by Cronus, was the virgin goddess of the hearth and home, representing stability and domesticity. She rarely left Olympus, her presence signifying the warmth and security of the divine abode. Then came the next generation, Zeus's children, each a powerful deity in their own right. Apollo, god of music, poetry, healing, and prophecy. Radiant and often associated with the sun, his twin sister. Artemis, the fierce and independent virgin goddess of the hunt, wilderness, and childbirth. Athena, born from Zeus's head, fully armoured and wise beyond measure, goddess of wisdom, strategic warfare, and crafts. Ares, the brutal and often unpopular god of war, representing the wild, destructive side of conflict. Aphrodite, goddess of love, beauty, pleasure, and procreation, whose origins were even more ancient, rising from the sea foam after Uranus's castration. Hephaestus, the lame but ingenious god of fire, metallurgy, and craftsmanship, who often forged weapons and tools for the other gods. And finally, Hermes, the swift messenger of the gods, trickster, and patron of travelers, merchants, and thieves. Later additions or sometimes replacements on the 12 list included Dionysus, god of wine and revelry, or even Hestia, sometimes stepping aside for him. This fluidity in the exact membership is a quirky tidbit about how pantheons are recorded. But generally, these were the core powers, each with their own domain, responsibilities, and often their own complicated dramas. You can sense the immense power distributed among them, a cosmic parliament presiding over the fate of the world and its inhabitants. The structure was set, the roles defined, and the age of Olympian dominance had truly begun. At the very apex of this newly established Olympian hierarchy sat Zeus, the undisputed king of the gods. You can almost feel the crackle of energy in the air around him, the subtle hum of immense power emanating from his throne atop Mount Olympus. He was not just a ruler, he was the embodiment of the sky, the wielder of the thunderbolt, and the ultimate arbiter of fate in the divine and mortal realms. His dominion was vast, his authority theoretically absolute, though often challenged by his own tempestuous nature and the machinations of others. The sheer power and authority of Zeus, often called the father of gods and men, is a paramount mainstream historical fact in Greek mythology. He was the central figure around whom countless myths revolved, the one whose decisions, whims, and often dramatic personal life shaped the destinies of deities and mortals alike. Think of him as the ultimate cosmic patriarch, juggling countless responsibilities, powers, and relationships. A quirky tidbit is that while Zeus was the god of justice and order, he was also incredibly prone to fits of rage and, perhaps more famously, to extramarital affairs. It's almost as if the supreme deity had a rather messy personal life, making him oddly relatable in a very human way. It makes you wonder if divine therapy sessions would have been a thing. Historians still argue whether Zeus's numerous affairs and often contradictory characteristics were meant to symbolize the unpredictable nature of the cosmos, or if they reflected evolving societal norms and the integration of diverse local cults into a unified pantheon. Was he a reflection of chaos or cultural fusion? You can picture Zeus on his magnificent throne, crafted by Hephaestus, surrounded by the other Olympians. He bore the aegis, a terrifying shield or cloak often adorned with the head of the Gorgon Medusa, which he used to inspire fear and demonstrate his power. In his hand, he clutched his most iconic weapon, the lightning bolt, forged by the Cyclopes, capable of shattering mountains and punishing defiance. The sheer visual impact of such a deity would have been awe-inspiring, even terrifying. His primary domain was the sky, controlling the weather, the clouds, and, of course, the mighty storms. When Zeus thundered, the very heavens shook, and when he hurled a lightning bolt, the world trembled. This power over the elements made him truly formidable, a force of nature personified. You can almost hear the distant rumble of thunder on a hot summer day and imagine it as Zeus having a particularly animated conversation. But beyond his elemental power, Zeus also held the scales of justice, maintaining order among gods and mortals. He was responsible for upholding oaths, punishing perjury, and ensuring the cosmic balance. Yet, his own actions often threw that balance into disarray. particularly his notorious romantic entanglements. Despite being married to his sister Hera, Zeus had countless affairs with goddesses, nymphs, and mortal women, resulting in a bewildering array of divine and heroic offspring. This constant marital strife and the resulting divine progeny are central to countless mythological narratives. You can sense the ongoing drama that perpetually swirled around Zeus. His indiscretions often led to Hera's furious vengeance, driving many of the heroic tales and tragic events in the mortal world. From these unions came many famous figures, like Heracles, Perseus, Helen of Troy, and many of the other Olympian gods themselves. He was the ultimate progenitor, constantly expanding the divine and heroic family tree. His judgments, while powerful, were not always fair or predictable. He could be stern, benevolent, cruel, or capricious, often embodying the unpredictable nature of supreme power. Yet, he was undeniably the glue that held the Olympian order together, the ultimate authority figure whose rule, though often challenged, remained paramount. You are witnessing the very essence of divine power, a complex and often contradictory force that shaped the destiny of an entire world. His presence permeates every corner of Greek mythology, a constant reminder of who sits at the top of the cosmic pyramid, while Zeus reigned supreme atop Mount Olympus. His cosmic authority was constantly challenged, not by rebellious titans anymore, but by the relentless, often fiery wrath of his queen and sister, Hera. You can almost feel the chill in the Olympian air when her temper flared, a palpable tension that made even the mightiest gods tread lightly. She was the goddess of marriage and childbirth, yet her own marital life was a perpetual storm of jealousy, fueled by Zeus's endless infidelities. Hera's profound jealousy and her relentless pursuit of Zeus's lovers and their offspring is a central, recurring mainstream historical fact in Greek mythology. Her vengeful machinations drive countless narratives, often turning tales of divine romance into tragic sagas for mortals caught in the crossfire. Think of her as the ultimate cosmic scorned wife, whose divine power makes her revenge particularly potent and far-reaching. A quirky tidbit about Hera is that despite her association with marriage and fidelity, she was also known for her immense vanity and a fiercely competitive nature, often instigating beauty contests or punishing those who dared to boast of greater beauty. It's almost as if her personal insecurities, born from Zeus's constant betrayals, manifested in a desire for unchallenged superiority. It makes you wonder if divine therapy sessions would have helped her too. Historians still argue whether Hera's portrayal as a perpetually jealous and vengeful wife reflects a patriarchal society's anxieties about female power, or if it embodies a more ancient, pre-Olympian earth goddess figure whose sacred groves were usurped by Zeus. Was she a product of sexism or a symbol of displaced ancient power? You can picture Hera on her magnificent throne beside Zeus, her regal posture often stiff with barely concealed fury. She was often depicted holding a scepter and wearing a crown, symbolizing her queenly status. Peacocks, with their magnificent, watchful eyes on their tail feathers, were her sacred animals, perhaps symbolizing her constant vigilance over Zeus's wanderings. You can almost hear the soft rustle of her divine robes, a sound that could precede either a gracious blessing or a furious curse. While Hera was revered as the protector of marriage and the patron of women in childbirth, her myths frequently highlight her darker side, her cunning, her vindictiveness, and her almost pathological need for revenge. When Zeus took a new lover, be it a goddess, a nymph, or a mortal woman, Hera's wrath was immediate and terrifying. She would devise elaborate schemes to torment both the mistress and, perhaps more cruelly, their innocent offspring. You can sense the sheer scale of her retribution. She cursed Leto, Apollo and Artemis's mother, preventing her from giving birth on any land. She drove Dionysus's mother, Semele, to beg Zeus to reveal his true divine form, resulting in her incineration. She subjected Heracles, the son of Zeus and Alcmene, to countless labors and hardships throughout his life, purely out of spite for his parentage. This relentless persecution of Zeus's illegitimate children is a dominant mainstream historical fact, illustrating the immense consequences of defying Hera's marital authority. Her actions often led to immense suffering, not because she was inherently evil, but because her divine power, combined with her intense emotional pain, manifested as destructive vengeance. She wasn't always rational, her jealousy often consumed her. Making her a dangerous adversary, she was a powerful force to be reckoned with, a deity who demanded respect and fidelity. And woe betide anyone who crossed her in matters of the heart. And so, while Zeus commanded the heavens, Hera held sway over the domestic realm, ensuring that even the most powerful king of the gods could not escape the consequences of his actions within his own divine household. Her presence constantly reminded everyone, divine or mortal, that even in a world ruled by supreme beings, personal dramas could unleash cosmic-level chaos. You are observing the ultimate power couple, albeit one with deeply entrenched marital problems that profoundly shaped the mythological landscape. Beyond the lofty peaks of Mount Olympus and the stormy affairs of Zeus and Hera lay a vast, shifting domain, perpetually in motion and brimming with its own unpredictable power. This was the watery realm of Poseidon, god of the seas, earthquakes, and horses. You can almost feel the salt spray on your face, hear the crashing of waves against ancient shores, as you delve into the domain of this powerful, often tempestuous Olympian. Poseidon's immense dominion over the oceans and all things aquatic, as well as his connection to seismic activity and horses, is a deeply ingrained mainstream historical fact in Greek mythology. He was one of the big three brothers, alongside Zeus and Hades, sharing in the cosmic lottery for control of the universe after the Titanomachy. Think of him as the ultimate deep-sea diver and seismic expert, with a rather impressive stable of steeds. A quirky tidbit about Poseidon is that while he controlled the seas, he was also credited with creating the first horse, striking his trident into the earth and bringing forth the magnificent creature. This dual dominion over water and horses seems a peculiar pairing, almost as if he's got a land-based hobby to balance his watery duties. Historians still argue whether Poseidon's association with horses stems from their role in ancient warfare and travel across the sea, or if it has deeper roots in pre-Olympian horse cults absorbed into his worship. Was it practical or spiritual? You can picture Poseidon, a formidable figure with a flowing beard and often a stern expression, wielding his mighty trident. This three-pronged spear was not just a symbol of his authority, it was the instrument of his power. With it, he could stir the calmest seas into churning maelstroms, shatter rocks, or summon devastating earthquakes that ripped through the land. Imagine the ground beneath you trembling with an unseen force, or the sudden, terrifying swell of the ocean, and you're experiencing Poseidon's direct influence. His primary residence was a magnificent palace deep beneath the Aegean Sea, crafted from gold, coral, and precious stones. Pulled by hippocampi, creatures with the foreparts of a horse and the tails of fish, you can almost glimpse the shimmering light filtering through the clear blue water, illuminating the grandeur of his underwater kingdom. From here, he presided over the vast marine life, the currents, and the hidden depths of the ocean. Like his brother Zeus, Poseidon was known for his formidable temper. When angered, he would unleash his fury in the form of devastating storms, shipwrecks, and tsunamis. He could be vengeful and destructive, particularly towards those who defied him or committed sacrilege in his domain. Remember Odysseus's long, arduous journey home? Much of that suffering was directly due to Poseidon's relentless wrath. This capricious and often violent nature is a mainstream historical fact, reflecting the unpredictable and dangerous power of the sea itself. He also had a rather active romantic life, though perhaps not as prolific as Zeus, taking many lovers among nymphs and mortal women, and fathering numerous heroic and monstrous offspring. His children included heroes like Theseus, but also giants, Cyclopes, and even winged horses like Pegasus. It seems the big three brothers all shared a certain wanderlust, despite his fearsome aspect. Poseidon was also worshipped as a benevolent god who could calm the seas, provide good voyages, and bless fishermen with bountiful catches. Mariners, traders, and coastal communities offered him sacrifices, hoping to curry his favor and ensure safe passage. You can almost hear the whispered prayers of ancient sailors, hoping for calm waters under Poseidon's gaze. His presence defined the watery expanses of the world, from the vast, open ocean to the turbulent straits and the hidden depths. Whether you were sailing the Aegean or simply walking along a coastal path, you were always aware of Poseidon's immense and unpredictable power, a constant reminder of the elemental forces that shaped the Greek world. He was a force of nature personified, a moody, magnificent ruler of the deep, while Zeus commanded the boundless sky and Poseidon held sway over the vast, turbulent seas. A third brother presided over a realm of eternal shadow, a dominion often whispered about with fear and reverence. This was the dark, solemn kingdom of Hades, the ruler of the underworld and the riches hidden beneath the earth. You can almost feel the temperature drop. The air grows still and heavy as you descend into his silent, unyielding domain. Hades' role as the god of the dead and the king of the underworld is a fundamental, undeniable mainstream historical fact in Greek mythology. Unlike his brothers, he rarely ascended to Olympus, preferring his subterranean kingdom, which often led to him being perceived as gloomy or even malevolent. Though he was neither inherently evil nor a tempter of mortals, he was simply impartial and utterly final. Think of him as the ultimate cosmic gatekeeper, managing the largest population center in the known universe. A quirky tidbit is that Hades was also known as Pluto, meaning the wealthy one. A reference not to gold or jewels, though he possessed those too, as they are mined from the earth, but to the vast numbers of souls who resided in his realm. So, in a rather morbid sense, he was incredibly rich. It makes you wonder if he had a celestial ledger for all the incoming traffic. Historians still argue whether Hades was genuinely feared and worshipped as a distinct deity, or if his name was often avoided in favor of euphemisms due to the ancient Greek discomfort with death, leading to a less direct form of veneration. Was he a deity to be prayed to or just acknowledged from a distance? You can picture Hades on his ebony throne in his palace deep within the underworld, a crown of unyielding darkness upon his head. He was a stern, unyielding god, unswayed by mortal pleas or flattery. His most prized possession was the cap of darkness or helm of Hades, a gift from the Cyclopes, which rendered its wearer completely invisible. Imagine a king who could simply vanish at will, a truly unnerving power for those who might plot against him. His kingdom, the underworld, was a complex realm divided into various regions: the fields of asphodel for ordinary souls, Elysium for the virtuous heroes, and Tartarus, the deepest pit, where the Titans were eternally imprisoned. Rivers like the Styx, Acheron, and Lethe, the river of forgetfulness, flowed through his domain, each with its own significant role in the journey of the dead. Charon, the grim ferryman, transported souls across the river Styx, provided they had a coin placed under their tongue, and guarding the gates, of course, was Cerberus, the multi-headed hound, ensuring no living soul entered without permission and no dead soul ever escaped. You can almost hear the faint, distant baying of Cerberus, a perpetual sentinel in the eternal gloom. Hades rarely interfered with the affairs of the living, preferring to maintain order within his own vast kingdom. He was a god of boundaries, of finality, ensuring that the cycle of life and death proceeded as ordained. However, he was not entirely devoid of personal motivations. His most famous act, and the source of his only significant interaction with the Olympian Council, was the abduction of Persephone, his niece. This controversial abduction, leading to Persephone's role as queen of the underworld, is a defining mainstream historical fact for Hades, and it ties him directly into the cycles of nature above ground. You can sense the profound solitude that often surrounded Hades. He was not a gregarious god, preferring the company of his shadowy subjects and his loyal queen. His power was immense, but it was a quiet, pervasive power, controlling the very threshold between life and death. While mortals often feared him, he was also respected for his impartiality and his unwavering commitment to his duties. He ensured that every soul found its rightful place, maintaining the cosmic balance that his brothers often disrupted. And so, while Zeus ruled the living sky and Poseidon the living seas, Hades presided over the ultimate destination, a reminder that all life, eventually, would pass through his silent, unyielding gates. His kingdom was not a place of evil, but of necessary finality. A testament to the inescapable cycle of existence in the grand, unfolding story of the cosmos, leaving the solemn depths of Hades's underworld. We ascend back to the vibrant, yet often sorrowful, world above, where the cycles of nature are inextricably linked to the emotions of the gods. Here, you'll encounter Demeter, the great goddess of agriculture, harvest, and the fertility of the earth. You can almost feel the warmth of the sun on your skin, the scent of fertile soil in the air, but also, lurking beneath, the chill of profound grief. Demeter's vital role in overseeing the earth's bounty and the cycles of growth and harvest is a fundamental mainstream historical fact in Greek mythology. She was the one responsible for ensuring the crops grew, the grains ripened, and humanity had sustenance. Think of her as the ultimate cosmic farmer, capable of turning barren ground into a field of plenty, or vice versa, depending on her mood. A quirky tidbit is that Demeter, despite her immense power over the earth's fertility, was herself quite vulnerable to emotional distress. Especially when it concerned her beloved daughter, her power was directly tied to her emotional state, making her a truly temperamental force of nature. It's like when your garden suddenly decides to stop growing because you've had a bad day. Historians still argue whether Demeter's myth, particularly the abduction of Persephone, was primarily an etiological myth explaining the seasons, or if it held deeper religious significance related to mystery cults and the cycle of death and rebirth. Was it about agriculture or spiritual understanding? Demeter had one beloved daughter, Persephone, a beautiful and joyful maiden who spent her days frolicking in meadows, gathering flowers with nymphs. You can almost picture her, a vision of youthful innocence, bathed in sunlight, the epitome of spring itself. Demeter doted on her, her happiness intertwined with her daughter's presence. However, Hades, the somber king of the underworld, had fallen deeply in love with Persephone. He longed for a queen to share his silent dominion. With the reluctant consent of Zeus, who, true to his character, didn't bother to inform Demeter of his agreement, Hades orchestrated a cunning abduction. As Persephone gathered narcissus flowers in a sun-drenched meadow, the earth suddenly split open. From the chasm emerged Hades, riding in his dark chariot, who swiftly seized the screaming maiden and dragged her down into his shadowy realm. You can almost hear her desperate cries echoing as the earth sealed itself behind them. Silencing her pleas, Demeter, upon realizing her daughter was gone, was plunged into an unimaginable grief. Her sorrow was not quiet, it was a cosmic wail that reverberated across the land. She abandoned her divine duties, refusing to let the crops grow, the seeds sprout, or the earth yield any bounty. She donned dark robes and wandered the world for 9 days and nights, searching desperately for her lost daughter, her anguish turning the fertile land barren. This profound grief and its catastrophic impact on the natural world is a deeply ingrained mainstream historical fact. Explaining the harshness of winter, you can sense the growing despair among mortals as famine spread across the land, the fields withered, the trees bore no fruit, and starvation threatened to wipe out humanity. Mortals prayed, offered sacrifices. But Demeter's grief was too profound to be swayed by their pleas. Even the other gods on Olympus grew increasingly concerned, as without human sustenance, who would offer them sacrifices and worship? The very balance of power was threatened. Zeus, finally realizing the catastrophic consequences of his actions and Demeter's unwavering despair, dispatched Hermes to the underworld to demand Persephone's return. However, there was a catch. While in the underworld, Persephone had eaten a few, usually 4 or 6, pomegranate seeds, according to the ancient laws of the Fates. Anyone who consumed food in the underworld was bound to remain there. This detail, the consumption of pomegranate seeds, is a crucial, quirky tidbit that provides the ingenious plot device for the myth's resolution, and it makes you wonder if Hades intentionally left them out as a clever trap. Historians still argue whether the pomegranate seeds represent a symbolic acceptance of the underworld's power, or if they were merely a convenient narrative mechanism to establish the cyclical nature of Persephone's return. Was it free will or divine trickery? This simple act of eating a few seeds would forever tie Persephone to Hades and his realm, creating a profound cycle that would shape the very seasons of the world. Demeter's reunion with her daughter was about to be bittersweet, and the world would forever bear the marks of her divine sorrow and eventual compromise. The cosmic tension was palpable. Demeter's profound grief had plunged the world into a desolate, unending winter, threatening all life. You can almost feel the biting cold, the gnawing hunger that afflicted the nascent human population. Zeus, finally swayed by the pleas of the other gods and the looming extinction of humanity, which, let's be honest, would mean no more worship or sacrifices for him, sent Hermes, the swift messenger, to the gloomy depths of the underworld, his mission to bring Persephone back. The partial return of Persephone and its subsequent explanation for the changing seasons is a quintessential mainstream historical fact in Greek mythology, a beautiful and enduring etiological myth that explains the natural world's cycles. It's a poetic way to understand why some parts of the world experience periods of growth and dormancy. A quirky tidbit is that while Hermes was the messenger, it was often the Hecate, goddess of magic and crossroads, who had originally heard Persephone's cries during the abduction and later accompanied Demeter in her search, acting as a crucial witness and confidant. It makes you wonder if Hecate subtly pushed Zeus towards a resolution. Historians still argue whether the Persephone myth, with its emphasis on death and rebirth, was primarily intended to explain agricultural cycles, or if it formed the basis for deeper mystery cults that promised initiates a better afterlife. Was it about crops or salvation? You can picture Hermes, wings on his sandals, descending into the silent, shadowy realm of Hades. He found Persephone, still beautiful, but perhaps a little paler, a little more somber, as she sat beside her dark husband. Hermes delivered Zeus's decree: Persephone must be returned to her mother, or the earth would never again be fertile. Hades, cunning as always, knew he could not defy Zeus outright, but he also knew his trump card. He agreed to release Persephone, but reminded them of the ancient law of the fates. Whoever consumes food in the underworld is bound to its realm. Persephone, whether tempted, coerced, or simply curious, had eaten a few, typically 4 or 6 pomegranate seeds. You can almost hear the quiet, almost melancholic crunch of those seeds. A tiny act with enormous cosmic consequences. This consumption, a seemingly small detail, meant she could not fully escape. A compromise was struck, a divine agreement to appease both Demeter's grief and Hades's claim. For a portion of the year, usually 1/3 or 1 month for each seed consumed, often 4 or 6 months, Persephone would return to the underworld to rule as Hades's queen. For the remaining part of the year, she would return to the surface world to be with her mother. This division of time, the cyclical nature of her presence, is the ingenious core of this mainstream historical fact. You can almost feel Demeter's immense joy when Persephone returned. As her daughter ascended from the underworld, the earth below responded instantly. Demeter's sorrow lifted, and with it, the barrenness vanished. The fields erupted in lush green, flowers bloomed, and the trees bore fruit. This period became known as spring and summer, a time of warmth, growth, and abundance, a direct reflection of Demeter's happiness. But when the time came for Persephone to descend once more into the underworld, Demeter's grief would return. Not as absolute as before, but a deep, mournful sadness that would cause the earth to wither and grow cold. This became autumn, as leaves fell and crops were harvested, leading into the barren, dormant period of winter, when Persephone reigned as queen of the dead. You can sense the quiet sorrow that descends upon the earth as the days shorten and the chill sets in. Mirroring Demeter's annual loss, this bittersweet cycle, the eternal rhythm of life, death, and rebirth, was now woven into the very fabric of the world. It was a constant reminder of divine power, of compromise, and of the profound emotional connections between gods and the natural world. Humanity learned to adapt to these cycles, celebrating the bounty of summer and enduring the lean times of winter. forever witnessing the cosmic dance of mother and daughter. The world was now truly set in its patterns, forever marked by the tale of Persephone's abduction and return, emerging from the seasonal drama of Demeter and Persephone. We turn our gaze towards a deity whose presence illuminated the Greek world in myriad ways. This is Apollo, the radiant god of music, poetry, healing, prophecy, archery, and light. You can almost feel the warmth of the sun on your face, hear the melodic strains of a lyre, and sense the profound wisdom emanating from his very being. He was, in many ways, the quintessential Olympian, embodying beauty, order, and intellectual pursuits. Apollo's diverse portfolio of domains, from the arts to foresight, is a fundamental mainstream historical fact, showcasing his pervasive influence across ancient Greek culture. He was a deity revered for his civilizing influence and his connection to human flourishing. Think of him as the ultimate polymath god, excelling at everything he put his divine mind to. A quirky tidbit about Apollo is his strong association with the sun, sometimes even being conflated with Helios, the actual sun god, while Helios drove the sun chariot. Apollo's light was more intellectual and spiritual, associated with truth and clarity, rather than just raw daylight. It makes you wonder if they ever had awkward conversations about who was truly responsible for the sunrise. Historians still argue whether Apollo's original role was primarily as a solar deity, or if his association with light and truth evolved from his prophetic functions, bringing clarity to the future. Was he a sun god first, or a truth-teller? You can picture Apollo, eternally youthful and handsome, often depicted with a lyre in his hands, or a bow and quiver slung over his shoulder. He was the son of Zeus and Leto, and the twin brother of Artemis. His birth, like many divine origins, was fraught with Hera's jealousy, forcing Leto to wander until she found refuge on the floating island of Delos, where Apollo and Artemis were eventually born. His most famous sanctuary was the oracle at Delphi, a site of immense religious and political importance throughout the ancient world. Here, the Pythia, his priestess, would deliver cryptic prophecies, guiding kings, generals, and common folk alike in matters of war, peace, and personal destiny. You can almost hear the whispered questions, the solemn pronouncements, echoing through the sacred halls of Delphi. This prophetic aspect, and the influence of the Delphic oracle, is a well-documented mainstream historical fact. Profoundly shaping ancient Greek decision-making, Apollo was also a master musician, enchanting gods and mortals with the melodies of his golden lyre. His music was not just beautiful, it had the power to soothe, to inspire, and even to heal. He presided over contests of music and poetry, always championing harmony and artistic excellence. You can sense the serene beauty of his artistic influence, a calm counterpoint to the more volatile aspects of the other gods, beyond his artistic and prophetic gifts. Apollo was also a skilled archer, his arrows capable of striking from a great distance with unerring accuracy. He could bring plague and pestilence with his arrows, but also healing and purification. This dual capacity for both harm and remedy made him a complex and often feared deity. He was the god who could strike you down with disease, but also cure you. It's a bit like a cosmic doctor who sometimes practices tough love with a bow and arrow. His epithets were numerous, reflecting his many roles: Phoebus, bright; Delian, from Delos; Pythian, from Delphi. He was a god who brought order, clarity, and the light of reason to the world, often standing in contrast to the more primal, chaotic forces that still simmered from earlier eras. He represented the civilized aspects of the divine, the pursuit of knowledge, and the beauty of creation. You are witnessing a deity of immense influence, shaping the intellectual, artistic, and spiritual landscape of an entire civilization. From the radiant presence of Apollo, we turn to his equally formidable, yet wilder, twin sister, Artemis. You can almost feel the cool, crisp air of ancient forests, hear the silent rustle of leaves underfoot, and sense the keen, watchful eyes of a huntress as you step into her sacred domain. She was the fiercely independent goddess of the hunt, wilderness, wild animals, the moon, and childbirth, embodying a powerful, untamed spirit. Artemis's role as a virgin huntress and protectress of the wild is a fundamental mainstream historical fact in Greek mythology, reflecting humanity's deep connection to nature and the reverence for untamed spaces. She was a deity respected for her purity, skill, and unyielding will. Think of her as the ultimate cosmic park ranger, but with arrows that rarely miss. A quirky tidbit about Artemis is her unique connection to both wild animals and childbirth. While seemingly contradictory, it highlights the ancient understanding of the raw, often dangerous, aspects of nature and the painful, yet ultimately life-giving, process of birth. It's like being both the fierce protector of wolves and the gentle midwife for new mothers. Historians still argue whether Artemis's worship evolved from an older, more primal mistress of animals deity, or if her dual nature as huntress and protector of young reflects the complex relationship ancient Greeks had with the wild. Was she a primal force or a nuanced guardian? You can picture Artemis, slender and athletic, perpetually youthful, clad in a short chiton to allow for easy movement, a silver bow in her hand, and a quiver full of arrows slung over her shoulder. She was often accompanied by a pack of hunting dogs and a retinue of nymphs, all devoted to the untouched wilderness. Her sacred animals included the deer and the bear, symbols of the wild, untamed beauty she protected. Her domain was the unspoiled wilderness, dense forests, rugged mountains, and remote marshes. She was the protector of wild creatures, ensuring the balance of nature. However, she was also a formidable huntress, her arrows bringing swift justice or swift death to those who disturbed her sacred places or wronged her. You can almost hear the soft thrum of her bowstring, a sound that meant either a clean hunt or impending divine wrath. Artemis was fiercely protective of her virginity and fiercely punished any who dared to threaten it or those in her care. The story of Actaeon is a famous example. He accidentally stumbled upon her bathing and was transformed into a stag by Artemis, then torn apart by his own hunting dogs. This uncompromising wrath against perceived violations is a significant mainstream historical fact, showcasing her unyielding nature and the severe consequences of disrespecting her. It's a rather stark reminder to always knock before entering. Despite her often harsh punishments, Artemis also embodied a protective aspect, particularly for young women and during childbirth. Women would pray to her for safe delivery, recognizing her as the one who both brought and alleviated the pains of labor. This duality of fierce hunter and protector of new life is a testament to the complex nuances of Greek deities. Her association with the moon, as a counterpart to Apollo's connection with the sun, further solidified her mystical and elusive nature. While Apollo shone with the bright light of reason and prophecy, Artemis governed the softer, more mysterious glow of the night, reflecting the untamed, intuitive side of existence. You can sense the quiet power of the moonlit forest, a place of silent observation and raw, natural instincts, all under Artemis's watchful gaze. Artemis was a goddess who carved her own path, embodying independence, strength, and an unwavering commitment to her principles. She was a constant reminder that even amidst the grandeur of Olympus and the dramas of human civilization, the wild heart of the world, with its beauty and its dangers, remained a powerful and respected domain. Stepping from the wild, moonlit forests of Artemis, we ascend to a different kind of domain, one where intellect and strategy reign supreme, often accompanied by the subtle gleam of polished bronze. This is the realm of Athena, the wise and formidable goddess of wisdom, strategic warfare, handicrafts, and heroic endeavor. You can almost feel the crisp, clear air of strategic thought, hear the quiet click of looms, and sense the keen, discerning gaze of a deity born for purpose. Athena's unique birth and her wide array of domains make her a truly exceptional and influential mainstream historical fact in Greek mythology. She was revered as a patron of cities, particularly Athens, which bears her name, and a protector of heroes, symbolizing the triumph of intelligence and skill over brute force. Think of her as the ultimate divine strategist and master craftswoman, always several moves ahead of everyone else. A quirky tidbit about Athena is her rather unusual birth. She sprang fully grown and fully armored from the head of Zeus after he swallowed her pregnant mother. Metis, the titaness of wisdom. Zeus had swallowed Metis because of a prophecy that her child would be powerful enough to overthrow him. Athena's emergence from his head symbolized her wisdom and strategic prowess. It makes you wonder if Zeus ever got headaches before that. Historians still argue whether Athena's birth from Zeus's head was meant to legitimize her power and wisdom through the patriarchal lineage, or if it represents a mythological shift from older, maternal sources of knowledge to a more male-dominated philosophical tradition. Was it about power or philosophy? You can picture Athena, a commanding figure, often depicted in full battle armor, complete with a helmet, a shield, often bearing Medusa's head, and a spear. Her sacred animal was the owl, symbolizing wisdom and keen sight in the darkness. She was a virgin goddess, dedicated to her pursuits of knowledge and warfare, much like Artemis was dedicated to the hunt. Her domain of strategic warfare differentiated her sharply from her hot-headed brother Ares. While Ares reveled in the chaos and bloodlust of battle, Athena championed disciplined tactics, defensive maneuvers, and the intelligent application of force. She was the goddess who advised heroes and cities on how to win wars through cleverness, not just brute strength. You can almost hear the quiet hum of strategic planning, the rustle of battle plans, rather than just the clang of swords beyond the battlefield. Athena was also the patron of handicrafts, particularly weaving and pottery. She taught mortals various skills, bringing civilization and artistic innovation. The Parthenon, her magnificent temple on the Acropolis in Athens, stands as a lasting testament to her patronage of architecture and the arts. This fostering of civilization and skills is a mainstream historical fact, highlighting her benevolent influence on human development. She was a staunch protector of heroes, lending her aid and counsel to figures like Heracles, Perseus, and Odysseus. Her interventions often provided the critical edge that allowed these heroes to overcome seemingly insurmountable challenges. You can sense her guiding hand, a subtle nudge here, a crucial piece of advice there, ensuring that justice and intelligence prevailed, despite her wisdom. Athena was not without her moments of divine temper, particularly when her pride was wounded. The story of Arachne, a mortal weaver who dared to challenge Athena to a weaving contest and boasted of her superior skill, is a famous example. Athena, enraged by Arachne's hubris and her disrespectful tapestry depicting the god's follies, transformed her into the first spider, forever condemned to weave. This swift punishment for hubris is a quirky tidbit, reminding mortals not to get too big for their britches, especially around a goddess of skill. Athena's presence permeated the political, intellectual, and artistic life of ancient Greece. She represented the ideal balance of strength and intellect, the power of calculated action over impulsive rage. She was a constant reminder that true power lay not just in physical might, but in wisdom, strategy, and the skillful application of one's talents. You are witnessing a deity who shaped not only battles, but also the very foundations of human culture and thought. From the calculated wisdom of Athena, we turn our attention to her half-brother, a deity who stands in stark contrast to her strategic brilliance. This is Ares, the volatile, often brutal, god of war. You can almost feel the hot, primal energy of battle. Hear the clash of steel and the roar of combatants as you step into his chaotic domain. Unlike Athena, who personified disciplined warfare, Ares reveled in the bloodshed, the fury, and the sheer destructive chaos of conflict. Ares' role as the god of savage, unbridled warfare is a consistent mainstream historical fact in Greek mythology. He was often disliked by the other Olympians, including his own father Zeus, who preferred Athena's more cerebral approach to battle. Think of him as the ultimate cosmic brawler, always looking for a fight and never too concerned with the rules. A quirky tidbit about Ares is that despite being the god of war, he was frequently depicted as losing battles, especially against Athena. This almost makes him seem less like a formidable deity and more like a perpetually grumpy, often outsmarted, thug among the gods. It makes you wonder if he ever just threw his shield down in frustration. Historians still argue whether Ares' unpopularity among the gods reflects a societal disdain for senseless violence, or if it was a narrative device to elevate Athena's strategic prowess as a more desirable form of warfare. Was he genuinely disliked, or just a foil for smarter deities? You can picture Ares, a muscular and imposing figure, typically clad in bronze armor, helmeted, and carrying a spear and shield. His sacred animals were the vulture, the serpent, and the dog, creatures associated with carrion, slyness, and aggression. He was often accompanied by his sons, Deimos, terror, and Phobos, fear, and his sister Eris, strife, who stirred up discord and chaos on the battlefield. You can almost hear the unsettling clamour of their entourage, a prelude to inevitable violence. His domain was the direct, visceral experience of battle, the bloodlust, the shouting, the terror, and the indiscriminate slaughter. He thrived on the primal urge to fight, inspiring warriors with courage and savage aggression, but often leading them to their own destruction through recklessness. He embodied the unthinking, brutal side of war, a force of destruction for its own sake. Ares was not a god of tactical brilliance or grand strategy. His approach was direct, furious, and often impulsive. While Athena would plan sieges and cunning ambushes, Ares would charge headlong into the fray, caring little for the consequences or the ultimate objective beyond the sheer thrill of combat. This contrast with Athena, his frequent rival, is a common mainstream historical fact, highlighting the different aspects of war represented by the Greek pantheon. Despite his fearsome reputation on the battlefield, Ares was not without his vulnerabilities. He was wounded by the mortal hero Diomedes during the Trojan War, aided by Athena, a rather embarrassing moment for a god of war. He was also famously entangled in an affair with Aphrodite, the goddess of love, a scandalous liaison that was publicly exposed by Hephaestus, Aphrodite's husband, much to the amusement of the other Olympians. This less than dignified aspect of his personal life provides a quirky tidbit, showing that even the most fearsome gods have their moments of folly. You can sense the volatile nature of Ares, a god whose presence guaranteed conflict and chaos. He represented the darker, more destructive impulses of humanity, the raw primal urge to engage in violence. While necessary for some aspects of human experience, his unbridled nature made him a dangerous and often unwelcome presence. Even among his fellow gods, his influence was felt keenly in every skirmish, every battle, and every act of aggression throughout the Greek world. A constant reminder of the brutal side of human nature, leaving the brutal and often messy battlefields of Ares, we glide into a realm of ethereal beauty, captivating charm, and irresistible desire. This is the luminous domain of Aphrodite, the goddess of love, beauty, pleasure, and procreation. You can almost feel the gentle warmth of an endless summer day, hear the soft whisper of ocean breezes, and sense the overwhelming allure that radiates from her very presence. She was, in essence, the embodiment of charm and irresistible attraction, a force that swayed gods and mortals alike. Aphrodite's undisputed status as the goddess of love and beauty is a paramount mainstream historical fact in Greek mythology. Her power transcended simple affection, encompassing desire, procreation, and the very allure of existence. Think of her as the cosmic matchmaker and influencer, capable of setting hearts aflutter across the entire universe. A quirky tidbit about Aphrodite is her rather unusual and somewhat older origin story compared to most Olympians. She was not born from the union of two gods. Instead, she rose from the sea foam, aphros in Greek, that gathered around the castrated genitals of Uranus after Cronus flung them into the ocean. So, she literally came from a rather gruesome, yet strangely poetic, primordial act. It makes you wonder if that's why she's so comfortable with drama. Historians still argue whether Aphrodite's dual origin, born from sea foam, or as the daughter of Zeus and Dione in other accounts, reflects different cultural influences on her worship, or if it symbolizes the two facets of love, pure, spiritual love and more primal, earthly desire? Was she a product of ancient, bloody creation or a later, more conventional divine birth? You can picture Aphrodite, perpetually young and exquisitely beautiful, often depicted rising from the sea or attended by doves and swans. Her beauty was so profound that it could inspire awe, envy, and uncontrollable passion in those who beheld her. She had a magical girdle, the Kestos Hymus, which had the power to arouse love and desire in anyone she wished, making her influence truly formidable. You can almost feel the subtle pull of attraction, the gentle warmth that spreads through the air when she is near. Her domain encompassed all aspects of love and desire, romantic love, sexual desire, beauty, pleasure, and the very act of procreation. She could inspire love or quench it, unite couples or drive them apart. Her influence was pervasive, affecting mortals, gods, and even the natural world. Flowers bloomed more brightly in her presence, and animals were drawn to each other. This pervasive influence over passion and fertility is a key mainstream historical fact, showing her fundamental role in the cycles of life, despite her immense power over hearts. Aphrodite herself was often embroiled in dramatic personal relationships. She was married to the lame and hard-working Hephaestus, the god of smithing, a rather mismatched pair. But her most famous affair was with Ares, the brutal god of war, a scandalous liaison that Hephaestus cleverly exposed. Much to the amusement of the other Olympians, this scandalous affair with Ares and its public revelation provides a juicy, quirky tidbit, showing that even the goddess of love has her messy moments. Aphrodite also had numerous mortal lovers and divine children, including Eros, Cupid, the god of love and desire, and Aeneas, a great Trojan hero. Her interventions in mortal affairs often revolved around love triangles, beauty contests, and the instigation of passion, famously playing a crucial role in the origins of the Trojan War by promising Helen to Paris. You can sense the captivating allure that followed Aphrodite wherever she went. She represented the irresistible force of attraction, the undeniable power of beauty, and the fundamental drive of life itself. While often a source of drama and conflict due to her influence over desire, she also brought joy, passion, and the continuation of life to the world. She was a constant reminder that even in a world ruled by thunderbolts and war, the power of love and beauty held an undeniable, often disruptive, sway from the dazzling, often tumultuous, realm of Aphrodite. We descend to a place of fire, sweat, and ingenious craftsmanship. This is the workshop of Hephaestus, the lame but brilliant god of fire, metallurgy, craftsmanship, and volcanoes. You can almost feel the intense heat radiating from a divine forge, hear the rhythmic clang of hammer on anvil, and smell the faint scent of molten metal and soot as you enter his industrious domain. Hephaestus's unique role as the divine smith and master craftsman, despite his physical deformity, is a significant mainstream historical fact in Greek mythology. He was the ultimate divine artisan, responsible for creating most of the magnificent weapons, armor, and elaborate devices used by the gods and even some mortals. Think of him as the celestial engineer and inventor, always tinkering with something fiery and impressive. A quirky tidbit about Hephaestus is his rather dramatic entry into the world. He was either born lame and ugly, causing his mother Hera to cast him from Mount Olympus in disgust, or he became lame after Zeus threw him from Olympus for interfering in an argument between his parents. Either way, he had a rather rough start, but it didn't stop him from becoming one of the most indispensable gods. It makes you wonder if divine parents ever considered family counseling. Historians still argue whether Hephaestus's lameness reflects the physical toll of ancient metalworking, or if it symbolizes the contrast between his physical appearance and his immense creative genius. Was it a literal characteristic or a metaphor for artistry? You can picture Hephaestus, often depicted with a beard, a conical hat, and wielding a hammer. His powerful upper body honed by endless toil, his primary workshop was often said to be beneath active volcanoes, like Mount Etna, a place of intense heat and primordial fire, tended by cyclopes he had freed from Tartarus. You can almost hear the rumble of the earth, the hiss of steam, and the clang of divine metal being shaped by his powerful hands. He crafted virtually all the iconic items in the mythological world: Zeus's thunderbolts, Hades's cap of darkness, Poseidon's trident, Athena's aegis, Achilles' impenetrable armor, and even the intricate golden chairs that could move on their own. His creations were not just functional, they were imbued with artistry and often possessed magical properties. This unparalleled skill in creation is a constant mainstream historical fact, highlighting his essential role in equipping the divine realm despite his incredible talent. Hephaestus was often portrayed as an outsider among the aesthetically perfect Olympians. A solitary figure dedicated to his craft rather than social graces, he was practical, hard-working, and rarely involved in the petty squabbles of the other gods, unless dragged into them. His marriage to Aphrodite was, as we've heard, a rather awkward arrangement, given her notorious affair with Ares. You can sense Hephaestus's quiet resilience. He was a god who found his power and purpose in creation, in the mastery of raw elements and the meticulous shaping of form. His workshop was a place of constant innovation, where the very forces of nature were harnessed and transformed into objects of divine power and beauty. His presence ensured that the gods always had the tools they needed. From the most destructive weapons to the most intricate pieces of jewelry, Hephaestus also played a role in the creation of Pandora, molding her from clay at Zeus's command. A bittersweet task given the subsequent misfortunes she unleashed. He was a god of immense creative power, whose contributions were vital to the functioning of the Olympian world, even if he often remained in the background, preferring the glow of his forge to the glitz of Olympus. You are observing a deity who truly understood the meaning of hands-on work, a powerful reminder that not all strength lies in physical prowess, but often in the meticulous skill of creation itself. Leaving the glowing forge of Hephaestus, we now turn to a deity of swiftness, cunning, and an undeniable knack for getting things done, often with a mischievous twinkle in his eye. This is Hermes, the swift messenger of the gods, the divine trickster, and the patron of travelers, merchants, thieves, and even herdsmen. You can almost feel the rush of wind as he glides past, hear the soft jingle of coins, and sense the quick wit that makes him indispensable to the Olympian pantheon. Hermes' multifaceted role as messenger, guide, and patron of diverse human endeavors is a well-established mainstream historical fact in Greek mythology. He was the ultimate divine utility player, capable of crossing any boundary, whether between realms or between moral codes. Think of him as the cosmic delivery person and the ultimate networker, connecting everyone to everything. A quirky tidbit about Hermes is that he was incredibly precocious even as an infant. On the very day he was born, he invented the lyre from a tortoise shell, stole Apollo's cattle, cleverly covered his tracks, and then charmingly lied his way out of trouble, eventually placating Apollo by gifting him the lyre. This incredibly sly and inventive start to his divine career cemented his reputation as a master of trickery and invention. It makes you wonder if divine daycare had particularly interesting incident reports. Historians still argue whether Hermes' trickster nature reflects an older, more primal deity associated with boundaries and liminal spaces, or if his role as a cunning messenger evolved as a reflection of the unpredictable nature of communication and trade in ancient society. Was he primordial chaos or societal reflection? You can picture Hermes, youthful and agile, often depicted with winged sandals, talaria, a winged traveller's cap, petasus, and carrying his iconic staff, the caduceus. Entwined with two serpents, he moved with incredible speed, able to traverse the vast distances between Olympus, the mortal world, and even the underworld in the blink of an eye. You can almost feel the gentle breeze as he zips past, a blur of divine efficiency. His primary role was to deliver messages and decrees from Zeus and the other Olympians to mortals and other gods. He was the ultimate divine communication channel, ensuring that divine will, warnings, and invitations reached their intended recipients. His persuasive charm and silver tongue often made him an excellent negotiator and diplomat, capable of smoothing over disputes or bending wills to his father's desires. This role as a divine communicator is a crucial mainstream historical fact, ensuring the flow of information throughout the cosmic hierarchy. Beyond his messenger duties, Hermes was also the psychopomp, guiding the souls of the dead from the mortal world to the underworld. He was the one who ensured a smooth transition, a benevolent figure in the face of death, a guide in the final journey. This makes him one of the few gods comfortable traversing all three realms, sky, earth, and underworld, with ease. You can sense his presence at crossroads, at thresholds, and wherever transitions occur. He was the patron of merchants, ensuring fair dealings, and of thieves, slyly overseeing their cunning acts. He also watched over travelers, protecting them on their journeys and ensuring safe passage. His influence extended to sports and athletics, making him the patron of gymnasts and wrestlers. He was a god of boundaries, overseeing transitions and connections between different spaces and groups. It's like having a patron saint for everything from package delivery to escaping a tricky situation. Hermes was often depicted as charming, witty, and incredibly resourceful, using his intelligence and speed to accomplish tasks that might stump other deities. He was a god of invention, credited with creating not only the lyre, but also the flute, astronomy, and even the alphabet. His presence brought dynamism, quick thinking, and a touch of playful mischief to the Olympian pantheon. You are observing a deity who was truly a jack of all trades, a master of movement, and an essential lubricant in the often stiff machinery of the divine world. From the agile wit and swift journeys of Hermes, we now plunge into a realm of ecstatic revelry, intoxicating pleasure, and profound, sometimes terrifying, spiritual liberation. This is the vibrant, often chaotic, domain of Dionysus, the god of wine, winemaking, grape cultivation, fertility, ritual madness, ecstasy, and theatre. You can almost feel the pulsating rhythm of drums, hear the joyous shouts and wild flutes, and smell the sweet, intoxicating scent of fermented grapes. Dionysus's unique and often paradoxical nature, embodying both joyous celebration and destructive madness, is a fascinating mainstream historical fact in Greek mythology. He was a deity who broke conventions, transcending boundaries of gender, class, and even sanity, offering his followers a profound, ecstatic experience. Think of him as the ultimate cosmic party planner and spiritual guide, all rolled into one, with a tendency to go a bit overboard. A quirky tidbit about Dionysus is his rather unusual birth and upbringing. He was the son of Zeus and the mortal princess Semele, Hera, in her typical jealous rage, tricked Semele into asking Zeus to reveal his true divine form, which incinerated her. Zeus, however, rescued the unborn Dionysus and sewed him into his own thigh, carrying him to term. After his second birth from Zeus's thigh, he was raised in secret by nymphs and satyrs, often far from Olympus, giving him a more earthy, less aristocratic perspective than the other Olympians. It makes you wonder if Zeus ever got leg cramps. Historians still argue whether Dionysus's cult, with its emphasis on ecstasy and breaking social norms, represents a primal, chthonic religion that predates Olympian worship, or if it was a later addition that offered an alternative, more emotional spiritual experience to mainstream Greek piety. Was he ancient earth magic or a counterculture movement? You can picture Dionysus, often depicted as youthful and effeminate, or as a mature, bearded figure, frequently crowned with ivy or grapevines and carrying a thrysus, a staff topped with a pine cone. He was accompanied by a boisterous retinue of maenads, frenzied female worshippers, satyrs, half-human, half-goat nature spirits, and Silenus, his wise, often drunken, tutor. You can almost hear the joyous clamour of their procession, a blur of dance, music, and unrestrained merriment. His primary gift to humanity was wine, a beverage capable of both lifting spirits and loosening inhibitions. But Dionysus was more than just the god of drink. He represented the liberation from societal constraints, the ecstasy that comes from abandoning oneself to primal urges and spiritual communion. His worship often involved wild, ecstatic dances and rituals, sometimes leading to acts of divine madness and inspired frenzy. This intoxicating influence and the concept of ecstasis, standing outside oneself, is a profound mainstream historical fact. Central to understanding Dionysian rituals, Dionysus was also associated with fertility, vegetation, particularly vines, and the life-death rebirth cycle, much like Demeter and Persephone. His narratives often involve his death and resurrection, symbolizing the cyclical nature of the vine. He was a god of revelation, who unveiled hidden truths and offered moments of divine insight through his inspired madness, unlike many Olympians who demanded strict adherence and obedience. Dionysus invited a more personal, visceral connection. He championed the outcast and the marginalized, often facing skepticism and persecution himself from those who feared his disruptive power, as seen in the myth of King Pentheus. You can sense the transformative power he offered, a chance to shed the mundane and experience something truly divine and raw. His influence extended deeply into Greek culture, particularly in the development of theatre. Ancient Greek tragedies and comedies evolved from festivals celebrating Dionysus, where masked performances and choral hymns were central. This connection to the dramatic arts is a quirky tidbit, showing how his wild revelry could blossom into structured, profound artistic expression. He was a god who embraced contradictions, bringing both joy and madness, liberation and destruction to those who followed his path. You are observing a deity who challenged the very notion of order, reminding everyone that sometimes true freedom lies in embracing the wilder, more passionate aspects of existence. Stepping back from the intoxicating revelry of Dionysus, we turn our attention to the ethereal presences that inspired creativity, charm, and grace throughout the Greek world. These are the Muses and the Graces, divine beings whose influence was often subtle, yet profoundly shaped the artistic, intellectual, and aesthetic landscape of ancient Greece. You can almost feel the gentle touch of inspiration, hear the soft strains of poetry, and sense the quiet elegance that emanates from their divine forms. The Muses' role as the goddesses of inspiration for the arts, sciences, and literature is a fundamental mainstream historical fact in Greek mythology. They were invoked by poets, musicians, philosophers, and historians alike, as the wellspring of creative genius. Think of them as the original divine muses, the ultimate sources of creative spark for humanity. There were typically 9 muses, daughters of Zeus and Mnemosyne, the titaness of memory, each presiding over a specific art form: Calliope, epic poetry; Clio, history; Euterpe, lyric poetry, flute music; Thalia, comedy; Melpomene, tragedy; Terpsichore, dance; Erato, love poetry; Polyhymnia, sacred poetry, hymns; and Urania, astronomy. This specific division of labor and their collective influence is a quirky tidbit, showcasing the organized nature of divine inspiration. It's like having a specialized department for every creative endeavor. Historians still argue whether the Muses were originally personifications of specific artistic forms or if they evolved from local nymphs or spirits of springs, later becoming systematized into a unified pantheon of inspiration. Were they abstract concepts or localized spirits? You can picture the Muses, eternally youthful and beautiful, often gathered around Apollo, their patron god, or near sacred springs on Mount Helicon or Mount Parnassus. Their presence was a source of wisdom, knowledge, and the divine spark that allowed mortals to create works of enduring beauty and significance. You can almost hear the faint hum of their collective wisdom, the gentle whispers of artistic possibility. Their influence was not just about raw talent, it was about the connection to a divine source, enabling mortals to transcend their human limitations and achieve greatness in their chosen fields. A poet would begin by invoking the Muses, seeking their divine assistance to weave a compelling narrative. A historian would pray for their guidance to accurately recall the past. This invocation of the Muses as the ultimate source of knowledge and artistic skill is a constant mainstream historical fact, illustrating the Greek belief in divinely inspired genius. Alongside the Muses were the Graces, known in Greek as the Charities. There were typically 3 of them: Aglaia, splendor; Euphrosyne, mirth; and Thalia, good cheer, not to be confused with the muse of comedy. They were the daughters of Zeus and Eurynome, or sometimes Dionysus and Aphrodite, Depending on the account, the Graces embodied charm, beauty, goodwill, and creativity. They were associated with all things lovely and pleasant, from feasts and dances to banquets and friendly gatherings. They were often depicted hand in hand, symbolizing their unity and the harmonious nature of their influence. You can almost feel the light's joyful energy they radiated, bringing elegance and delight to both divine and mortal celebrations. This embodiment of beauty and charm is a consistent mainstream historical fact, reflecting the Greek appreciation for aesthetic perfection and social grace. A quirky tidbit is that the Graces were often closely associated with Aphrodite, attending to her and enhancing her beauty, but they also had strong ties to Dionysus and the Muses, suggesting their role in all forms of joyful artistic expression and celebratory gatherings. It seems they were the ultimate social butterflies of the divine world, always where the fun was. You can sense the subtle yet profound impact of these ethereal beings. They didn't wield thunderbolts or command armies, but their power was in shaping the human spirit, inspiring creativity, fostering joy, and adorning life with beauty. They were the silent architects of culture, ensuring that humanity strove for excellence, found delight in aesthetic pleasures, and remembered the lessons of the past. Their presence was a constant reminder that even amidst the dramatic conflicts of the gods, there was a profound appreciation for beauty, intellect, and the enduring power of inspiration, beyond the grand council of the Olympians and the inspiring presence of the Muses and Graces. The Greek mythological world teemed with countless other divine beings. You can almost feel the presence of unseen spirits, hear the rustle of leaves in sacred groves, and sense the unseen movements in the depths of bubbling springs. These were the minor deities, a vast and varied host of nymphs, satyrs, river gods, dryads, oreads, nereids, and countless others who populated every corner of the natural world, breathing life and magic into the landscape. The sheer proliferation of minor deities, each tied to a specific natural feature or phenomenon, is a widespread mainstream historical fact, reflecting the ancient Greek polytheistic worldview where divinity permeated every aspect of their environment. They weren't just abstract concepts, they were the very spirits of the rivers, mountains, and forests they inhabited. Think of them as the ultimate local spirits, each with their own tiny domain and quirky personality. A quirky tidbit is that many of these minor deities, particularly the nymphs, were incredibly long-lived, sometimes immortal, but not all. Some, like the hamadryads, tree nymphs, were said to die if their tree died, making them particularly vulnerable to mortal deforestation. It makes you wonder if ancient Greek environmentalists ever protested logging. Historians still argue whether the worship of minor deities was a remnant of older, animistic beliefs that predate the Olympian pantheon, or if they developed as local expressions of piety, adding flavor and specificity to the broader divine landscape. Were they ancient echoes or local color? You can picture these beings everywhere you turned in the ancient world. If you walked along a river, you might sense the presence of a river god, a local deity with immense power over the flowing water. If you rested in a forest, a dryad or hamadryad might be watching from the trees, embodying the spirit of the woods. Climbing a mountain could bring you into the domain of an oread, a mountain nymph. And by the sea, nereids, the graceful daughters of the sea god Nereus, might be seen dancing on the waves. You can almost hear the soft splash of a naiad in a fresh spring, or the gentle rustle of leaves as a dryad moves through her tree. These minor deities often interacted directly with mortals, sometimes benevolently, sometimes with mischievous intent, and sometimes with tragic consequences. They could guide lost travelers, protect herds, inspire awe, or, if angered, inflict localized curses or lead mortals astray. Their stories often provided moral lessons or explained specific natural phenomena. For instance, the echo in a valley might be attributed to a heartbroken nymph. Satyrs, half-human, half-goat creatures, were often associated with Dionysus, known for their love of wine, music, and merriment, but also for their wild, sometimes aggressive, natures. You can sense their playful, chaotic energy, often found cavorting through the woods. Pans, with their goat legs and mischievous pipes, were also prominent, causing fear and sudden terror, hence panic, among those who disturbed their solitude. This rich tapestry of localized divinities meant that the world was alive with sacred presence. Every grove, every stream, every hill had its own spirit, its own story. It made the natural world a place of profound wonder and potential danger, a place to be respected and revered. This pervasive sense of immanent divinity, where gods were not just distant rulers but intimate presences, is a key mainstream historical fact. You are observing a world far more enchanted and complex than our own, where the line between the mundane and the divine was incredibly thin. The minor deities were the threads that wove the grand tapestry of mythology into the daily lives of ancient Greeks, making every corner of their natural environment a sacred space. Their tales, often simple and poignant, rounded out the vast mythological cosmos, reminding everyone that divinity wasn't just on Mount Olympus, it was all around them, in the whisper of the wind and the murmur of a flowing stream. Having explored the vast pantheon of gods and spirits, we now shift our focus to the mortal realm, where human beings, though lacking divine power, often achieved extraordinary feats, sometimes with the aid or hindrance of the gods. These were the mortal heroes, legendary figures whose lives were filled with incredible challenges, epic quests, and often tragic ends. You can almost feel the sweat and strain of their Herculean efforts, hear the roar of monsters, and sense the indomitable spirit that drove them. The widespread reverence for mortal heroes and their legendary exploits is a crucial mainstream historical fact in Greek mythology. These figures served as aspirational models, embodying virtues like courage, cunning, and endurance, even as they grappled with very human flaws. Think of them as the ancient world's superheroes, often with more complex backstories and far more divine interference. A quirky tidbit is that many of these heroes, despite their mortal status, were actually demigods, children of a god, usually Zeus, and a mortal woman, or a goddess and a mortal man. This divine parentage often bestowed them with extraordinary strength, intelligence, or skill, explaining their superhuman feats. It's like having a cosmic head start in the hero business. Historians still argue whether the heroic myths were entirely fictional narratives, or if they preserved fragmented memories of actual historical figures whose deeds were later exaggerated and embellished into legend. Were they pure fiction or legendary history? Among these champions, none stood taller, quite literally, than Heracles or Hercules in Roman mythology. He was perhaps the most famous and celebrated of all Greek heroes, renowned for his immense strength, courage, and his legendary 12 labours, born from Zeus's affair with Alcmene. Heracles was destined for greatness, but also for immense suffering, largely due to Hera's relentless jealousy. You can picture Heracles, a figure of immense musculature and raw power, often depicted with a lion skin cloak and a club. His very birth was marked by Hera's attempts to thwart him, sending 2 snakes to his cradle, which the infant Heracles promptly strangled with his bare hands. This early display of superhuman strength set the tone for his extraordinary life, driven to madness by Hera. Heracles tragically killed his own wife and children, overcome with guilt. He sought guidance from the oracle at Delphi, who instructed him to serve King Eurystheus of Tiryns for 12 years and perform a series of seemingly impossible tasks. These 12 labours were designed to be utterly overwhelming, intended to kill him. You can almost feel the weight of these impossible tasks resting on his mighty shoulders. These labours are a testament to his enduring strength and perseverance, a cornerstone of his legendary status, the Nemean lion, slaying an impenetrable lion and wearing its hide. The Lernaean hydra, defeating a multi-headed water serpent whose heads regrew. The Serenaean hind, capturing a swift, sacred deer with golden horns. The Erymanthian boar, trapping a gigantic, fierce boar. The Augean stables, cleaning the filthy stables of King Augeas in a single day. The Stymphalian birds, driving away man-eating birds with bronze beaks. The Cretan bull, capturing a monstrous bull from Crete, the mares of Diomedes, taming man-eating horses, the girdle of Hippolyta, obtaining the girdle of the Amazon queen, the cattle of Geryon, stealing cattle from a three-bodied giant, the apples of the Hesperides, retrieving golden apples from the mythical garden, often requiring the help of Atlas, Cerberus, bringing the three-headed hound from the underworld. Each labor was a mainstream historical fact, a story taught and retold, showcasing not just physical might but also cunning and endurance. You can sense the relentless challenge, the moments of despair, and the ultimate triumph against overwhelming odds. Heracles' life was a cycle of struggle and achievement, a constant battle against monsters, men, and divine machinations. His ultimate apotheosis, becoming a god upon his death, was a rare honor for a mortal hero. Cementing his place in the divine pantheon, he remains the quintessential strongman, a symbol of perseverance against impossible odds, moving beyond the sheer strength of Heracles. We now encounter a hero whose triumphs relied more on cunning, divine aid, and sheer audacity in the face of impossible odds. This is Perseus, the slayer of monsters and rescuer of maidens. You can almost feel the desert wind whipping around you, hear the faint rustle of snakes, and sense the sharp glint of a polished shield as you delve into his legendary quest. Perseus's iconic quest to slay the Gorgon Medusa and rescue Andromeda is a pivotal mainstream historical fact in Greek mythology, embodying themes of destiny, heroism, and the triumph of good over monstrous evil. He's the original hero with 1,000 faces, or at least, a hero with a very shiny shield. A quirky tidbit about Perseus is his unusual conception. His grandfather, King Acrisius, locked his daughter Danae in a bronze tower after an oracle prophesied that her son would kill him. Zeus, however, visited Danae in the form of a shower of golden rain, impregnating her. So, Perseus literally had a golden shower for a dad. It makes you wonder what kind of stories they told at divine playdates. Historians still argue whether the Medusa myth was purely a symbolic representation of overcoming primal fears, or if it had roots in ancient cult practices involving a terrifying Gorgon figure that was later anthropomorphized and defeated by a hero. Was she a monster or a memory of older worship? You can picture Perseus, youthful and courageous, often depicted with winged sandals borrowed from Hermes, a helmet of invisibility from Hades, and a magical bag, kibisis, for Medusa's head. His story begins with a classic oracle prophecy. His grandfather, King Acrisius of Argos, was foretold that his grandson would kill him. Terrified, Acrisius cast Danae and the infant Perseus adrift in a wooden chest upon the sea. They were eventually washed ashore on the island of Seriphos, where they were rescued by a kind fisherman named Dictys. Years later, Polydectes, Dictys's tyrannical brother and the king of Seriphos, desired Danae but wanted to get rid of Perseus. He cunningly challenged Perseus to bring him the head of the Gorgon Medusa, a seemingly impossible task designed to lead to the hero's demise. Medusa was a terrifying creature with venomous snakes for hair, and anyone who looked directly upon her face would be instantly turned to stone. You can almost feel the creeping dread of such a monstrous task. The ultimate selfie that turned you into statuary, Perseus, dauntless, accepted the challenge, but he was not alone. He received crucial divine aid from Athena and Hermes. Athena gave him a highly polished bronze shield, which he could use as a mirror to see Medusa indirectly, thus avoiding her petrifying gaze. Hermes provided him with winged sandals to fly to Medusa's distant lair, and a special curved sword, a harp, designed for the precise task of beheading. He also borrowed Hades' helm of invisibility from the Grey AA, 3 ancient hags who shared one eye and one tooth. By tricking them, this divine toolkit is a clear mainstream historical fact, showing that even the greatest heroes need a little help from their friends, especially when those friends are gods. You can sense the tense moment as Perseus, guided by Athena, entered the Gorgon's lair. He crept past the petrified figures of previous victims, their silent, stony stares a chilling warning. using the reflective shield. He approached the sleeping Medusa, carefully avoiding her direct gaze. With a swift, decisive stroke of the harp, he severed her head. From her bleeding neck sprang Pegasus, the winged horse, and Chrysaor, the giant with a golden sword. With Medusa's head safely tucked into his magical bag, which conveniently negated its petrifying power, Perseus began his journey home. On his way, he encountered Andromeda, a beautiful princess chained to a rock as a sacrifice to a sea monster. Cetus, sent by Poseidon to punish her mother's hubris. You can almost hear her desperate cries, the crashing waves, and the monstrous roar of the approaching beast. Perseus, using Medusa's head, or sometimes his sword, turned Cetus to stone and rescued Andromeda, claiming her as his bride. This daring rescue is another iconic mainstream historical fact, adding romance and adventure to his legendary exploits. Perseus's return to Seriphus, his defeat of Polydectes by turning him to stone with Medusa's head, and his eventual accidental fulfillment of the prophecy, killing his grandfather Acrisius with a stray discus throw, all cemented his status as a legendary hero. He was a hero who proved that even against predetermined fates and monstrous odds, cunning, courage, and divine favor could lead to extraordinary triumphs. From the sky-soaring triumphs of Perseus, we now descend into the dark, labyrinthine depths of Crete, where another hero faced a monstrous challenge that combined brute strength with insidious deception. This is Theseus, the hero of Athens, renowned for his intelligence, courage, and his legendary confrontation with the Minotaur. You can almost feel the damp, cool air of a subterranean maze, hear the distant, guttural bellows of a beast, and sense the creeping dread of being utterly lost. Theseus's iconic adventure within the labyrinth and his defeat of the Minotaur is a central mainstream historical fact in Greek mythology. Deeply intertwined with the early history and political identity of Athens, he was the hero who freed his people from a terrifying tribute, embodying cleverness and decisive action. Think of him as the ancient world's greatest escape artist and monster hunter, all wrapped up in one very determined prince. A quirky tidbit about Theseus is his rather complex parentage. He was the son of King Aegeus of Athens, but also, in many accounts, secretly the son of Poseidon. This dual paternity gave him both royal lineage and divine strength, conveniently explaining his heroic abilities. It makes you wonder if his birth certificate was particularly difficult to fill out. Historians still argue whether the Minotaur myth reflects an ancient memory of Minoan Crete's naval power and perhaps bull-leaping rituals, or if it was purely a symbolic narrative created by Athens to assert its cultural and political superiority over Crete. Was it historical allegory or political propaganda? You can picture Theseus, a courageous and athletic youth, sailing towards a destiny he eagerly sought. His journey to Athens was already legendary. He cleared the roads of numerous bandits and monstrous figures, performing a series of labors similar to Heracles, though on a smaller, more localized scale. These early exploits established his reputation as a formidable hero, eager to prove his worth. The specific challenge that brought him to Crete was grim. For years, Athens had been forced to send a terrible tribute to King Minos of Crete, 7 young men and 7 young women every 9 years, to be fed to the Minotaur. This beast, a monstrous half-man, half-bull creature, was the result of a curse on Minos's wife Pasiphae, who had unnaturally fallen in love with a bull. The Minotaur was confined within the labyrinth, an impossible maze designed by the master craftsman Daedalus, from which no one could escape. You can almost hear the terrified whispers of the Athenian youths chosen for this grim fate, knowing they were walking into a death trap. This horrifying tribute and the existence of the Minotaur in the labyrinth is a gruesome but central mainstream historical fact. Theseus, outraged by this injustice, volunteered to be one of the sacrificial youths, determined to kill the Minotaur and end the tribute once and for all. Upon arriving in Crete, he captivated Minos's daughter, Ariadne, with his bravery and noble bearing. Ariadne, deeply in love, decided to help him, defying her own father. Her aid was crucial. She consulted Daedalus, the labyrinth's creator, who revealed the secret, a simple ball of thread. Ariadne gave the thread to Theseus, advising him to tie one end to the entrance and unwind it as he ventured deeper into the maze. She also gave him a sword, either her own or one blessed by the gods, to slay the beast. This act of Ariadne's, providing the thread and sword, is a defining, quirky tidbit, showing that even the strongest hero sometimes needs a cunning woman's help. You can sense the tense silence as Theseus entered the dreaded labyrinth, the thread unwinding behind him. He navigated the bewildering twists and turns, guided by the thread and his own unwavering resolve. Finally, deep within the maze, he confronted the Minotaur. It was a brutal or terrifying struggle, a clash of human cunning against bestial rage. Theseus, using the sword, managed to overpower and slay the monster, ending its reign of terror. You can almost hear the final, dying bellow of the beast echoing through the stone corridors, with the Minotaur defeated. Theseus followed Ariadne's thread back out of the labyrinth, leading the surviving Athenian youths to freedom. His triumph was immense, bringing an end to Athens' long subjugation to Crete and cementing his status as a legendary hero. Though his journey home involved a bittersweet betrayal of Ariadne, he abandoned her on Naxos, often attributed to divine instruction or his own forgetfulness. His victory over the Minotaur remained a defining moment in his legendary life, a testament to courage and the power of a guiding thread in the darkest of places. From the dark, victorious escape from the labyrinth, we now shift our focus to the greatest and most prolonged conflict in Greek mythology, a war that shaped the destinies of countless heroes, gods, and cities. This is the epic saga of the Trojan War, a decade-long siege sparked by love, betrayal, and divine intervention. You can almost feel the dust and heat of the besieged city, hear the clang of bronze on bronze, and sense the overwhelming weight of fate pressing down on its participants. The Trojan War, its characters, and its key events are arguably the most famous and widely referenced mainstream historical fact from Greek mythology, forming the bedrock of epic poetry and influencing countless works of art and literature. It's the ultimate ancient blockbuster, with a truly star-studded cast of heroes and deities. A quirky tidbit about the war's origin: it was indirectly caused by a divine beauty contest. Eris, the goddess of discord, threw a golden apple inscribed to the fairest among the gods, leading to a judgment by Paris, a Trojan prince, who chose Aphrodite after she promised him the most beautiful woman in the world, Helen. It makes you wonder if divine beauty pageants always ended in global conflict. Historians still argue whether the Trojan War was a purely mythical event, a highly embellished account of a real Bronze Age conflict, or a composite of various skirmishes and trade disputes transformed into a grand narrative. Was it poetry, or a very old war report? You are now immersed in the events leading up to this monumental conflict. Helen, the most beautiful woman in the world, was already married to King Menelaus of Sparta. But when Paris, acting on Aphrodite's promise, visited Sparta, he abducted, or eloped with, depending on the version, Helen and spirited her away to Troy. This act, the abduction of Helen, was the direct catalyst for the war, a violation of hospitality and a profound insult to Menelaus and his brother, King Agamemnon of Mycenae. Menelaus, enraged, called upon all the Greek kings and heroes, bound by an ancient oath, to retrieve Helen and exact revenge on Troy. This oath, sworn by all suitors of Helen to defend her chosen husband, ensured that almost every major Greek hero participated, creating an unparalleled assembly of might and renown. You can picture the vast armada gathering, 1,000 ships setting sail from Aulis, their sails billowing with the winds of divine destiny and human vengeance. The siege of Troy lasted for 10 long years. You can almost feel the endless grind of daily warfare, the constant tension of battle, the immense losses on both sides. The war was fought outside the massive, impenetrable walls of Troy, a city famed for its fortifications and its heroic defenders. On the Greek, Achaean side were legendary figures like the mighty Achilles, Almost invulnerable save for his heel, the cunning Odysseus, master of strategy, the valiant Ajax, and the wise Nestor. On the Trojan side, defending their homeland, were the noble Hector, the valiant Aeneas, and the wise King Priam. The gods themselves were deeply involved, often taking sides and actively interfering in the battles. Hera and Athena fiercely supported the Greeks, driven by their past slight from Paris. Aphrodite championed the Trojans, as did Apollo and Ares. You can sense the celestial hand guiding arrows, granting strength, or sending omens, making the conflict a grand divine chess match with mortal lives as pawns. This active involvement of the gods is a pervasive mainstream historical fact throughout the Trojan War narrative. The war was marked by numerous duels, epic speeches, and tragic deaths. Heroes fell on both sides, their lives sacrificed for glory, honor, and the will of the gods. The conflict seemed locked in a stalemate, with Troy's walls holding firm and Greek might unable to breach them directly. It was a war of attrition, demanding endless perseverance and cunning. You are witnessing a defining moment in ancient storytelling, where human will and divine influence clashed on an epic scale, leading to a dramatic and ultimately deceptive conclusion after 10 long, brutal years of stalemate and endless bloodshed. The Trojan War finally reached its dramatic climax, not through brute force against Troy's formidable walls, but through an act of ingenious deception. You can almost feel the weary exhaustion of the endless siege, the desperate longing for a resolution, as the cunning plan that would decide the fate of Troy began to unfold. The ruse of the Trojan horse, leading to the fall of Troy, is perhaps the most iconic and universally recognized mainstream historical fact from the entire Greek mythological cycle. It's the ultimate lesson in looking a gift horse in the mouth. Quite literally, think of it as the original, and perhaps greatest, Trojan malware. A quirky tidbit is that the idea for the Trojan horse is widely attributed to Odysseus, the cunning king of Ithaca, a hero renowned for his sharp intellect rather than just raw strength. This highlights how intelligence and deception were often valued as much as, if not more than, physical prowess in achieving victory in Greek heroic narratives. It makes you wonder how many other ingenious, but less famous, scams were pulled off in ancient times. Historians still argue whether the Trojan horse was a literal wooden horse, a siege engine that resembled a horse, or a metaphor for a hidden entry point or a cunning military maneuver. Was it a giant toy or a clever tactic? You can picture the weary Greek forces, after a decade of fruitless siege, seemingly giving up hope. They dismantled their camp, boarded their ships, and sailed away, leaving behind only one peculiar object on the plains before Troy, an enormous wooden horse. This was no ordinary sculpture. It was hollow, meticulously crafted, and utterly silent. The Trojans, after years of fierce resistance, watched in disbelief and cautious triumph. The remaining Greek, Sinon, was left behind to tell a carefully constructed tale. He claimed that the horse was an offering to Athena, meant to atone for the Greeks' sacrilege during the war, and that it was too large to be brought into the city. He spun a tale of divine anger and a desperate Greek attempt to appease the gods before their retreat. He also claimed it was built so large specifically to prevent the Trojans from bringing it inside, as doing so would grant them Athena's favor and ensure their victory. You can almost hear his persuasive lies, the desperate yearning of the Trojans for an end to the war blinding them to the obvious deception. Despite the warnings of Laocoon, a Trojan priest who famously declared, "Beware of Greeks bearing gifts," and hurled a spear at the horse, only to be punished by sea serpents sent by Poseidon and Athena, and the prophetess Cassandra, whose prophecies were always true but never believed. The Trojans were convinced. You can sense the mix of triumph and suspicion in the Trojan ranks, the celebration that quickly overtook caution. They breached their own impenetrable walls, dragging the immense wooden horse into their city as a trophy, believing it signaled their hard-won victory. That night, as the Trojans celebrated their apparent triumph, feasting and drinking, the hidden Greek warriors emerged from the belly of the horse, led by Odysseus, and often including Menelaus and other key heroes. They silently opened the city gates. Outside, the rest of the Greek fleet, which had secretly returned under the cover of darkness, poured into the city. This stealthy infiltration and the subsequent surprise attack is the dramatic pivot, a decisive mainstream historical fact that marked the end of Troy. You can almost hear the shift from celebratory song to terrified screams as the unsuspecting city was plunged into chaos. The Greeks, fueled by years of frustration and a thirst for vengeance, massacred the Trojan men, enslaved the women and children, and set the city ablaze. Troy, the proud and resilient city, fell in a single, brutal night. The war, seemingly endless, concluded with devastating swiftness. The fall of Troy marked the end of an era, a cataclysmic event that resonated through all subsequent Greek myths and histories. While the Greeks had achieved their victory, it came at a terrible cost, setting in motion new tales of arduous homecomings and further divine retribution for their sacrilege. The world now entered a new phase, forever marked by the grand tragedy and cunning deception of the Trojan War. With the smoke still rising from the ruins of Troy, the victorious Greek heroes, weary but triumphant, finally turned their thoughts homeward. You can almost taste the lingering ash in the air, feel the exhaustion in your bones, as the grand epic of the Trojan War finally concludes. But for many, the journey home would prove to be as challenging, if not more so, than the war itself, especially for the king whose cunning had ultimately brought Troy down. This is the arduous, decade-long homecoming of Odysseus, the nostoi, or returns, of the Greek heroes from Troy are a significant mainstream historical fact in Greek mythology, collectively forming a sequel to the Trojan War. Among these, Odysseus's epic journey, chronicled in Homer's Odyssey, is by far the most famous, a timeless tale of perseverance, temptation, and divine wrath. Think of it as the original long-haul flight, but with far more monsters and far fewer in-flight movies. A quirky tidbit about Odysseus is his epithet polytropos, meaning much-travelled or many-sided, referring to his cunning, adaptability, and resilience. He wasn't the strongest or the swiftest, but his wit and ability to think on his feet saved him from countless perils. It makes you wonder if he had a particularly good poker face. Historians still argue whether the Odyssey was composed by a single poet, Homer, or if it was the culmination of a long oral tradition, weaving together various folk tales and heroic legends into one coherent narrative. Was it a singular genius or a communal effort? You can picture Odysseus, a seasoned warrior and cunning strategist, embarking on what should have been a swift return to his kingdom of Ithaca and his waiting wife, Penelope, and son, Telemachus. But his journey was plagued by a series of misfortunes, many of them stemming from his own hubris, his curiosity, and the unrelenting wrath of Poseidon, whom he had angered by blinding the god's Cyclops' son, Polyphemus. You can almost feel the spray of the stormy seas, the constant threat of unseen dangers. As he sails through unknown waters, his voyage became a true odyssey, a series of perilous encounters that tested his resolve, his crew, and his very sanity. He and his men encountered the Cecones, an early skirmish where his men indulged in plunder, leading to heavy losses. The Lotus Eaters, where consuming the lotus fruit made his men forget their desire to return home, attempting escape from reality. The Cyclops Polyphemus, a brutal encounter in a cave where Odysseus outsmarted and blinded the one-eyed giant, incurring Poseidon's eternal wrath. This cunning defeat of Polyphemus is a major mainstream historical fact, showcasing Odysseus's signature cleverness. Aeolus, king of the winds, who initially helped him with a bag of winds, only for his curious crew to open it, blowing them far off course. The Laestrygonians, a race of cannibalistic giants who destroyed most of his fleet. Circe, a powerful sorceress who turned his men into pigs, but whom Odysseus managed to overcome with divine help. Staying with her for a year, you can almost hear her enchanting songs, the grunts of his transformed crew. The underworld, land of the dead, where he consulted the prophet Tiresias and spoke with the spirits of fallen heroes and his own mother. The sirens, whose irresistible, deadly songs lured sailors to their doom, but which Odysseus famously resisted by lashing himself to the mast and plugging his crew's ears. This act of self-restraint and cunning is a well-known quirky tidbit. Scylla and Charybdis, a terrifying passage between a six-headed monster and a deadly whirlpool, forcing him to make an agonizing choice that cost him more men. The cattle of Helios, where his remaining crew, despite warnings, slaughtered and ate the sacred cattle of the sun god, incurring further divine wrath, leading to their final destruction through all these trials. Odysseus alone survived, losing his entire crew and ships. He was eventually shipwrecked on the island of Ogygia, held captive by the nymph Calypso for 7 years, longing for home. Finally, with the intervention of Athena and Zeus, he was allowed to leave, building a raft and sailing to the land of the Phaeacians, who generously helped him return to Ithaca. His homecoming was not easy. He arrived disguised as a beggar, facing a palace overrun by greedy suitors vying for his wife's hand and his throne. With the loyal help of his son Telemachus and a few faithful servants, he revealed himself and brutally slaughtered the suitors. Re-establishing his rule and finally reuniting with Penelope, this bloody but triumphant return is the concluding mainstream historical fact, showing the grim realities of reasserting authority. You are witnessing the ultimate story of perseverance against overwhelming odds. A testament to the enduring human desire for home and family. Odysseus's journey is a microcosm of the human experience, filled with temptations, losses, and the unyielding pursuit of one's destiny, guided by cunning and protected by divine favor. His tale reminds us that even after the greatest victories, the most challenging journey often lies in finding your way back to where you truly belong. End of script. Sweet dreams.